Fathers of Reddit, do you have any funny stories of being your daughter's overprotective dad? I work at an anime convention and a lot of parents come through with their children. One day a father and his daughter who was dressed in a skimpy outfit came up to buy passes. While the daughter chose her cosplay character as her badge name, her dad's badge read she's 14 and I own a shotgun. Her own personal bodyguard. I'm the daughter of an overprotective father. My dad used to make meals full of yummy garlic. I love garlic. Before parties when I was a teenager, it wasn't till years later I realized I probably smelled like garlic at all my high school parties. I confronted him about it and he smiled and said, I wondered when you'd realize. I'm not too bright. My daughter isn't quite old enough yet, turns 1 in 3 days, for me to be the overprotective dad, but I have a story about my stepdad and my sister that I love to tell. The day after my wedding, I went down to the hotel's dining area for some breakfast, only to be greeted by my frantic mother. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed and I'm so sorry. I hope we didn't ruin your wedding. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I had her explain. Apparently, my sister's a shat boyfriend, who we'll call Joe, had a little too much to drink at the reception and got verbally abusive toward her back in their hotel room. My sister, upset, called down to my parents' room and asked for my stepdad to come down and try to help calm Joe down. My stepdad walked down the hall to my sister's room and got an expletive-laden earful from Joe. My stepdad stepped out into the hallway, probably to prevent himself from popping Joe in the jaw, and Joe followed him saying, I'll talk to that freaking bee however I want to. My mom, upon hearing that, got between Joe and my stepdad. Joe then proceeded to get in my mom's face and push her on the shoulder with his fingers. That didn't sit well with my stepdad, who, in addition to being built like a brick shithouse, is a marine and a trained fighter. In front of everyone who had a room on that floor, which included all of my wife's family, my stepdad grabbed Joe, put him in a submission hold of some sort, carried him to the elevator, rode down 3 floors, and literally threw him out the hotel's front door into the cold, January, Wisconsin weather, and told him not to come back upstairs until he sobered up and apologized to my sister. As my sister was Joe's ride, Joe called his father to come pick him up at the hotel, a 90-minute ride for Joe's dad. As far as I know, he never did apologize to my sister, and it still took my sister 2 more months to break up with that idiot. Your stepdad is the restraint of a monk. I am quite amazed that story didn't end with Joe being in an ambulance. Had to take her, 12, to buy volleyball shorts. Fathers, avoid this at all costs. Apparently, private parts shrink wrap is the correct size. I kept sending her back in to try on larger sizes, until she finally said, with an exasperated look, Dad, these are the biggest size they make. Frick everything about that. Volleyball player here. This is true. My dad always had a pair of pants waiting for me before and after my games. Mine is a little different, but I know I am in trouble and will be that overprotective dad. My daughter, who is 9, has a few little boys that like her. I told her the other day, just to let you know, the first boy you bring home I am going to have to shoot him just to make a point. She looked at me, not missing a beat. She told me, well, I guess I should bring the ugly one home first. I am screwed. To frick with the first guy she brings home, just say so that's the ugly one. I got involved with this boy when I was 14. He was 16 and on the wrestling team. One day, I cracked a joke at his expense. I do this with all my friends, and he backhanded me and told me he wasn't someone to insult. I was in shock. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I told him he would regret hurting me. I grabbed my stuff and took off for home. It was a 45-minute walk. So, I get home and my brother asks me why I'm home from school in the middle of the day. Then he sees my face. My cheek was bright red and I had the beginnings of a real shiner. My brother got an ice pack, gave it to me and told me to start talking. I relay what happened. I went to my room to cry and try to calm down. I came down a few hours later and my brother was gone. He didn't come back until after supper. The next day at school, my now ex-boyfriend wasn't there. I was pretty relieved because I had no idea how to handle it. Same thing the next day, and the next. He missed that entire week of school. Week after, my eye is pretty much healed and he shows up with a broken arm, broken nose and stitches in his swollen lip. He saw me and fear flashed across his face. My brother denies ever laying a finger on him and refuses to tell me exactly what he did or who he talked to about it. Looking back, I should have told my parents, but we were not on good terms then and my brother has always been there for me. Most times I don't even need to ask for his help. He just sees through me and does what needs to be done. As a brother with 3 younger sisters, this is the correct response. As a brother to what I suspect to be a KGB sleeper agent, I don't think I'll ever need to be protective. A boy groped my 13-year-old sister's thigh once, right in front of me, the cocky crap, and she immediately turned round and Falcon punched his 2 front teeth into his windpipe. Someone actually had to slap him on the back to stop him choking. Your sister is awesome. My ex-girlfriend's father told me that if I hurt his daughter he would cut my balls off, hang them from the ceiling fan and make them repeatedly hit me as they go around. Now that's some creativity. My sister had a bad habit of dating buttholes and dongs. My dad has the mountain man beard and before this day I had never seen him clean shaven. Well, dong boyfriend was over and he asks why my dad has no beard today. My dad responded, I only shave it when I kill someone. I was on the other end of maybe the most awkward version of this ever. Me and 2 buddies ended up in a friend's, who was a girl, living room. Her dad started doing the prototypical shotgun cleaning in the living room. That was awkward, but then this exchange happens. Her dad, what the heck are you doing? Him, just making sure. Her, there are 3 guys here. What do you think I'm going to do, sleep with them all? Him, you are your mother's dog. The, her, mortified. It was awesome. We were at a Chuck E. Cheese-like establishment and our daughter was playing in the play area. She was about 2 at the time. They have an area with multiple slides, all lined up so the kids can race. As our daughter was heading down her slide, and a little boy slid down the slide next to her. During their descent, he reached over and grabbed her arm and was pulling and twisting it. She responded with a panicked help me shriek and my so responded with the loudest growl scream I've ever heard. It was a simple hey to get the attention of the boy so he would release her. It was as if a jet was ripping through the air. It was so loud and booming. If you've ever been in one of these places, the noise is just ridiculous. In the moment my so screamed, the entire place fell silent, like church silent. You could hear a cricket. Once the complete silence lifted and white noise began to fill the room, I gave him the "are you kidding me" look. His response, I don't care if he's 2 or 12. If he hurts my daughter I'll rip his head off. Thankfully, he has relaxed a bit through the years. Chuck E. Cheese. My father once shoved and then literally threw a boy out the front door of our house after I invited him over without my parents at home. Apparently a neighbor called my dad at work. We were actually just watching TV. I dated a black girl in high school. I am white and during the time period, I was a hipster in doing so. When she invited me over to her home, her mother told me that her daddy is locked up, but he will be out soon. So make sure you treat his baby girl with respect. I found out later that her father never was locked up. He was overseas in the military at that time, which would have been just as effective in keeping me afraid. When he returned home and I met him after 2 years, he turned out to be a real nice guy. Dated his daughter for 4 years and ended up breaking it off very respectfully due to her job as a stripper. Another story for another time. Story time. My dad is very overprotective. My fiance used to be long distance, and on our first anniversary he came to my state to visit. The first time he met my father, he was cleaning his guns and loading them very calmly. It backfired and my fiance just got so excited over the guns and started asking about where he got them and started a conversation. We still could not go on a date or be without a chaperone at all times. Finally, a gun cleaning story that ended well. A young boy kissed my 3-year-old daughter full on the lips at a birthday party and exclaimed to the world his undying love for her and professing the need to make babies. Before I could correct the situation, my daughter cocked back and smashed the boy in his mouth. See daddy, just like you taught me. Oh ho crap. My dad was actually pretty funny with my sister. It was a Friday afternoon and my sister was introducing her boyfriend to my dad. After exchanging pleasantries, her boyfriend asked what time would you like her back by, to which my dad responded have her back by Sunday. This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. The boyfriend of my oldest daughter went up to her room to change into some shorts. The door to the upstairs was next to the couch I was playing some games on. Everyone else was outside running through multiple sprinklers in the backyard. I decide to inform the young man on his way outside after changing that, "You are an alright kid, but if I ever catch you coming out of my daughter's room with different pants than you end up with, Jimmy, you seem like a good kid, I'd hate to have to kill ya." Evidently, I was a little too sincere whilst trying to be funny. After being brought to task by my wife and daughter, I had to go up into my daughter's room and explain I was only playing. Told him if I was going to kill I'd already done it, and he should get out from behind bed and come downstairs. Told him if I was going to kill I'd already done it. Hehehe. I'm a bit of an overprotective uncle. So one day my niece's boyfriend was my sister brother-in-law and bought a bumper sticker that said "Your little princess is my little W." I felt the need to step in. The next time I saw him I made a joke about it and asked if he put it on his car. Then as he laughed it off and said not yet, I told him I also bought a bumper sticker. It says I killed my niece's boyfriend and buried him in a shallow grave but have not put it on my car yet either, and walked away. I'm not a father, but I do have a related story. When I was 17 I went to go pick up a girl I was dating at her house. At the time I was wearing jeans with many holes all down the front because for some reason I thought it was fashionable. When I get to her house, her father opens the door. He looks me over and tells me to wait outside for a second. He returns a half minute later with a roll of duct tape and proceeds to tape up every last hole on my jeans. I didn't realize it at the time, but the man was doing God's work. My father has a lot of friends who are trash men, so when my sister started dating he took the guy to the side and he said, like, "If you ever treat my daughter badly then I will make sure no one will ever find your body." He was frozen in fear. A good guy though. I try to not be the overprotective dad. That's so last century, man. Instead, I've given her my sense of humor and critical analysis mindset. Take that, hormonal teenage boys. I got invited to prom my freshman year of high school. I went out, bought a dress, shoes, everything. 2 weeks before prom the friend of mine that was taking me came by the house. My stepdad literally cleaned a shotgun in front of him and talked about how nice it was to live near so much land that no one ever used. Guess who didn't go to prom that year? I've been on the receiving end of something pretty funny. Not really overprotective though. I'd been with a girl for a while and knew her mom, but had never met her dad due to him being deployed. Her mom left to go pick him up from the airport without either of our knowledge. We were at her place alone, watching Lord of the Rings, and made some popcorn. They came back around 2 hours later. Guess they got something to eat. Drink time it took to wait possibly fricked. I didn't ask, and they both walked in the door. I'd never met the man, so I turned ghostly white. First thing this man said to me, "Good, your clothes are still on." I thought I wasn't done killing people. Not my daughter, but my niece. My nieces bring their boyfriends over to meet me for the obligatory "he will crush you if you mess with me" speech. I am a very large, 6'7", 325 lbs, shave-headed, tattooed motorcycle riding man. I usually give the speech in a jovial manner and try to get the guy laughing, or at least smiling, so he knows I am not just some out of control donghead. One time at a party, my niece's then boyfriend got pretty toasted and started berating my little niece. She came to me in tears, and that did it. He was sitting in a couch with several of his friends, and when I walked up, he looked up and said, "What you gonna do?" I then picked him smooth up off that couch and one quick motion smacked his head on the ceiling. I lowered him down to my face level and calmly told him that crashing sound he just heard and felt was God calling him home, and that meant it was time to die. He started crying right there in front of his friends, and soon everyone was laughing at him, so he got pouty mad and left the party. They did not stay together very long after the party if I remember correctly. LOL. My oldest daughter, who is now 18, had her first date when she was 15. I always joked with her that I would be cleaning my gun with the first boy she dated. My wife always said, "No, do not do that, it's too mean." Well, the day comes, and I decide to call up a good friend and go to the shooting range that day. Although this is no ordinary day at the range, I fill my friend in. He laughs and wants to have fun with it too. We went to the range in full Rambo mode. I wore my tack vest with pistol attached, took my AR, threw on my shotgun just for crap and giggles. I also took another pistol in a leg holster. Did the whole 9 yards. My friend did the same. We looked absolutely idiotic. Fast forward to 7 PM. We make sure we get to my house just before he is due to arrive. We end up getting there just as they were leaving. Imagine 2 guys. My friend is 6'5", fully Rambo'd out walking up the driveway. I walked up to my daughter and asked her to introduce us. The sheer horror on this kid's face was absolutely priceless. I was in the doghouse for weeks, but worth it. My only regret for not having a daughter is the fact that I won't be able to greet a BF at the door and let him know that I'm not afraid to go back to prison. I'm not a dad, but was on the receiving end of an overprotective father. Flashback a few years to my first year of med school, and recently graduated from an engineering school. First, going from engineering girls to med school girls is fantastic, and naturally went after a drop-dead gorgeous blonde med student a year above me. We hit it off well, and soon after starting to formally date, I'm going to meet her family. We ended up getting to her hometown a few minutes early, and her dad, a pediatrician, says to come by the hospital so we can meet while the rest of her family gets ready. Her dad is one of those types that may be 50, but is more physically fit and active than most 20-year-old guys. So much so that his arms never quite could be put down to his sides because he had too much muscle. We meet in the atrium of his fancy hospital, muscle bulging from his arms, and politely shake hands until I lost circulation in my fingers. Polite bullshitting ensues about how nice his daughter is. He then invites us up to his floor as he has a few circs to perform. Now I'm only in my 3rd month of med school, so I'll look at my older GF and ask, what is a circ? Turns out it's a circumcision. Frick is all that is going through my head. We enter the circ room, to where he has about 5 babies lined up ready to go. For those unfamiliar, the baby is strapped to a board, exposed entirely, and with a swift guillotine device, the foreskin is chopped off. I assist with all of the procedures as the GF stands in a corner laughing at me becoming petrified of her dad. We ended up breaking up, very clean break, and to this day, I cannot be mad at her dad for how I met him, as chopping off baby penis foreskin remains the most effective way to scare the crap out of a boy. TLDR. My Hulk Hogan-esque ex's father made me perform circumcisions with him for the first time that we met. I was once accused of being the reason for my daughter breaking up with a guy. He said that I set an impossibly high standard for anyone wanting to date my daughters to try to match. I hope that I'm guilty as charged. If not, I will attempt to be. I'm especially humble. It's probably my best feature. Not a father, but I am very protective of my 15-year-old little sister. She goes to boarding school. She is a little genius about 45 minutes away from where I go to college. One day she called me crying about some guy who wouldn't stop texting her and waited for her outside of her classes. The final straw for her was when she saw him watching her from different spots on her running route 4 days in a row. So I got in my car and drove down to her school. When I got there, she met me in the parking lot and explained how his texts kept getting angrier and angrier when she stopped responding. I'm a pretty stereotypical college pothead. I'm into all of that peace and love stuff, and it takes a lot for me to lose my temper. However, texting my sister 6 times without a response and calling her a C will make me go berserk. So after I took her out to lunch, I asked some of her friends if they knew where I could find the kid. After being pointed in the right direction, I eventually found him walking around outside of my sister's dorm. I walked up to him, introduced myself as her loving older brother, and proceeded to tell him that if he continued giving her problems that he and I would have a very serious issue. She hasn't heard from him since. TLDR. Little sister had a kid borderline stalking her at her school. Big brother swoops in to save the day. My mom has a photo that grandma took of my grandpa standing on their porch looking through a pair of binoculars with a rifle in his hand. Story goes, she was at the end of the property in a car with her new boyfriend when the picture was taken. I know, mom not daughter. I had a GF's dad when I was in college tell me, anything you do to my daughter, I'll do to you. Coming from a 6'6" army ranger with quite an intimidating demeanor, it made me feel a bit awkward. Luckily he didn't follow through on the threat. Kinky. Oh sure, I've been terrorizing my daughter's boyfriends as often as possible. My family has always been the type that pokes fun, pranks, teases and generally screw with each other for the love. Any boy that can't handle it has no place here, so I think that he needs a little testing to make sure. My most recent, well, this was a pretty standard ploy, but hey, my daughter was dating this kid. He was actually not a bad guy, had a pretty epic beard, so I gave him some respect for that. However, he was pretty timid, and that's sort of irresistible for me. He had asked her to his prom, they went to different HS, and had shown up to pick her up. 2 important things. 1. My daughter is beautiful. Seriously, and that's not just dad pride. When she dresses up, she's pretty stunning, but doesn't do it often and normally is a ponytail, no makeup, sweats kinda girl. 2nd, that morning, I had taken my son out to the shooting range, so I'm still in my orange shirt and tactical vest and pants. I left my 9mm out on the coffee table for cleaning after I put a few hundred rounds through it. So, this guy shows up, my girlfriend lets him in. While he's standing there, waiting for my daughter to come downstairs, I say nothing and just look at him while I finish cleaning my gun. I finish up, put the barrel back in, and put the slide in place, but don't rack it back yet. Just at that moment, my daughter comes downstairs, the classic reveal moment from the landing. She's got on a strapless, formal dress, blonde hair up with curls, basically all dolled up and looks amazing. His jaw drops a bit. This is the first time he's seen her dressed to the nines. As he is staring at her coming down the stairs, I pull the slide and rack it a few times, loudly. He actually jumped, looks at me and turns a bit pale, which is amusing on a guy normally dark olive skinned. My daughter actually stifles a laugh, then comes down to reassure the boy. We had some lovely pictures, one of me with my arm around his shoulder and my gun in the holster in the front of my pants. Amusingly, he's a Sikh, so I actually challenged him to a sword fight, Punjabi style. Unfortunately, my daughter dumped him before we got a chance. Not so much an overprotective dad, but an overprotective brother. So when this story took place I was in 8th grade, and my sister was in 4th. So the little brother of the 8th grader Shat, we'll call him Pete, made it clear to everyone that he had a thing for my sister. So one day I was out throwing the discus for track with my friend, and Pete decided to come out and watch. After a while, he decides to start bragging about how he made his move on my sister and that she was his for the picking. So, naturally, I gently pick up the child and tell him that if I ever hear of him doing anything with my sister he would wish he had never been born. I then proceeded to gently set him back down and ask him to go get a discus I had just thrown, and when he went out to get it, just to prove my point, I threw another discus that landed right next to him and scared the crap out of him. TLDR. Little Ashat said my sister was his property, proceeded to tell him otherwise. Parents of Reddit, what's been the most WTF moment that you've witnessed with how someone interacts with your child? An employee at a hardware store once thought my 3-year-old daughter was carrying around a stick BC I was making her, in case she was bad, so I could hit her with it. I think she misheard something I said when answering her initial question, but I had just said yeah. She found it outside earlier and just wanted to carry it everywhere with her today, and from that, she heard something like I'm making her carry this stick as a reminder to be good, or else I'll use the stick to hurt her. The worst part was, she said yeah, I remember when mine were that age. You have to keep them in line and never let them forget who's in charge. It was weird until that point, at which it was purely disturbing. I couldn't pay and get out of there fast enough. My younger son is autistic, mostly nonverbal, and had semi-regular physical stims, flapping hands, bouncing on the balls of his feet, etc. when he was younger. Besides all the usual nasty looks, total disregard, and mumbled insults probably every parent of a mentally or developmentally disabled child gets, we've experienced some simply awful people. Ones that stick out include a woman who tried to pass us in the supermarket line. Cut in line, I wasn't blocking the aisle or anything, by just squashing my son between our carts. Like his face was literally smooshed up through the wire mesh of the cart. I snapped at her and pushed her cart away, and she responded with, "It's not hurting him. He's just a retard anyway. I had one woman watching him in another store once. She sort of followed us around, and I kept my eye on her. Then, when my son made a random noise, she ran up, grabbed his head, got down in his face, and said, "No, no, you psycho retard. Nice people are shopping," even if he screamed, which he sometimes did. Ugh, no call for that. I knocked her into a rack of clothes and yelled at her, and store security came running. ETA. I didn't want to go to jail. I had my 2 little boys with me. They're a year apart, and both of them started crying when both of these things happened. I guess I'm more of a flight and fight type person. I just wanted to scoop them up and get them out of there. Oh ho ho ho, this one has made me the most angry out of all of the ones I've read so far. I was walking with my son back from the park, and this weird butt looking old dude came off his porch and walked up to me and my son and asked him directly, "Would you like to come in and see my kittens and pray with me?" and kinda reached out towards his shoulder. I answered for him, "No, we do not want to, thanks," and walked away. I'm not against my son petting someone else's kitties, or against religion, but if my son decides he wants to be religious, it's going to be from his own doing and not gonna be because of some creepy butt pedo looking dude. Probably tame compared to other people's stories, but that creeped me right the frick out, and I still avoid that house whether my son is with me or not. Not me, but was at a work get together at a park the other day, and parents were able to bring their kids with to have fun at the park. This one mom had her small child there, and people were going around and holding the child. Well, this one creepy looking guy who I'm not even sure worked at our company was there and asked to hold the baby. Mom says that it feels like child's diaper is wet and she's going to change it. Creepy dude then says, "Oh, no worries. If you want, I'll change it for you." It wasn't even my child, but I was immediately worried about the kid being around that guy and side-eyed him the whole time to make sure he wasn't doing anything. Our daughter was wearing typical boy clothing at age 5 when a 7-10-year-old boy came up to us and asked would he or she like to play with this. We actually thought it was cute and our fault for the blue shirt and red and grey sandals, but we still laugh about it. Well, that's sweet of them to phrase it like that, TBH. My partner was in the checkout queue in a DIY store when a middle-aged man told our 6-month-old daughter that he would see her in 20 years because she was smiling at him. Took my kids to my grandma's house so they could go swimming. My grandma lives with my mom. My mom's boyfriend of the month was over at the house. I had no idea she had someone over. If I'd known, we wouldn't have gone over. I'd never met this guy before, ever. We haven't seen him since either. Anyway, my kids jump in the pool and this guy starts snapping pics of them with his phone. WTF? Why would some stranger want pics of my kids? I shut it down. The guy and my mom ended up leaving to go shopping. Good riddance. We were able to relax and enjoy the pool. I worked at a low-income daycare for a while, and we took the kids on a field trip on the straight-up public bus, and this old lady started petting the head of one of the 6-year-old boys, and we had to tell her to stop, but she kept starting up again until we physically got between her and the kid. Kid was a real social butterfly, so he got a laugh out of being the center of the ruckus. But we were creeped way out. Okay, I'm gonna look like an bot for this, but a month ago, I accompanied my friend's 3-year-old on a flight for their visitation. The father was seeing us off, along with his mom, the child's grandmother. I wanted to show them how well behaved she was going through the line to the Tsar check, so I tried to high-five her in front of them. What they witnessed instead was me missing her little hand and shoving my hand into this poor toddler's face like Goku conjuring a Kamehameha orb, saturating all the energy from what was supposed to be a good-natured expression of great job into a hostile, full-strength uppercut with my palm. Honestly, I'm hoping it's the most WTF moment they've witnessed with someone and their kid. Kid still thinks I'm cool. My god, I've not laughed that hard in a while. This happened to me. I was 12/13 at the time, ANF there was a power outage. Wanting to investigate, I went to a next door neighbor and asked if their power was out as well, and he said yes. A couple days later he knocks on my door and my mom answered. It's an older man and said his son is depressed and would like my company to cheer him up. My mom closed the door. Some guy came up to my son, before haircut, and started petting him and scratching behind his ears, saying I want to get myself a Peking East too. I'm a nanny, but I spend 24/7 with these kids, so my 4-year-old has gorgeous, dark curly hair. They all do, actually, but hers is to her waist. Once had a 40-something lady on the subway try to pull her into her lap. When I yelled at her, she whimpered and pouted about how she was a hairstylist and just wanted to play a bit with her hair. I have a few, though I only witnessed one firsthand. 1. Shortly after she was born, I took my daughter to my mom's house. I ran into my mom's neighbor while carrying her to the front door. He stopped to say hi, then told my daughter, "I'm sorry you were born. Sweetie, life is going to crap all over you, you'll learn that soon enough." 2. My husband was at the grocery store one day and had our daughter, then about a year old, in the cart. A woman scooted over on an electric scooter and told him she was cute. He said thanks, and she followed up with, "But she's so skinny she should be in a concentration camp." He immediately texted me what she said, and we both pondered over the shit in that sentence. 3. Another one from my mother-in-law. My daughter, Mill, and husband went out of town together and were staying at a nice hotel. While taking the elevator to their suite, another passenger told them that she's afraid of little people. She then apparently screamed at my daughter, "You're going to kill me," over and over for the rest of the ride. My daughter was 3. That third one sounds like someone was having a really bad drug trip. Auntie takes care of my kids one night each weekend so I can take my wife on a date, or did, when life allowed. One time we ended up having a quick dinner, got home while they were all awake. We snuck in, hoping to hide out in the basement and get some bonus alone time. Heard her tell them it was bedtime in 10 minutes, then 5 minutes, then it was bedtime, and they proceeded to put themselves to bed. It was WTF, cause it never works for us. Not that I mind reading to them or whatever else, but it's never that easy. But it worked for her. Then like a half hour later I thought I heard screaming. Wife mutes the TV and I make it out immediately. It's not screaming, it's moaning. The girl is watching P in my living room, with my kids upstairs. It was totally a WTF, but like my wife said, I don't know how I feel. It's not like you don't watch P on your computer after the kids go to bed. Do you think she's jilling off in your lazy boy? So we just banged in the basement. Seemed like the thing to do. It was WTF, cause it never works for us. Not that I mind reading to them or whatever else, but it's never that easy. But it worked for her. Kids save their best work for their parents. They know for a fact that mom and dad will always love them, so they push boundaries. Congrats on a strong attachment, and also on a funny post. D. My sons are all very good looking. My first awakening moment came with my oldest. By the time he was in high school, I got used to girls his age and slightly older making comments, but I was left speechless and shocked when I overheard the mothers of my daughter's friends, people my age and older, talking about him in the same sexual way. It was sickening, and then when they noticed I heard them, they laughed and tried to pass it off as a joke or light-hearted banner. Still upsets me. The other issue I had to deal with is the amount of pictures other girls would take of my sons and spread them online. I learned through the grapevine some of the hashtags used. At one baseball game, there were some high school girls making rude comments about one of my sons and taking pictures of his butt every time he bent down as a catcher. I didn't say anything to them as his girlfriend went after them, and after she was done, she had managed to embarrass them in front of the entire crowd enough that they quickly left. I moved a bowl of peanut M&Ms out of reach for my 16-month-old, at the time, who is highly allergic to peanuts. It was from a low table on one side of a walkway to a higher counter, literally 2 feet away. My sister-in-law then says to me, "You can't keep her in a bubble forever. No crap, butthole." But she's a baby and doesn't understand that those beautiful little pieces of candy will kill her, and she can't talk to tell me if she eats one and has a reaction. With about a million kids running around and chaos all over, I'm not taking any chances. My sister-in-law also has food allergies, so you'd think she'd understand, but it turns out she's just a bee. This isn't creepy and probably doesn't belong here, but it's funny. Whenever my mom and us kids would go to the grocery store, my baby brother would find any empty shelf and sit down and say, "Free boy for sale." I know, but it was cute. Anyway, one day he did this and an older woman said, "I'll take him to be funny." We laughed. My brother ran to my mom and wouldn't stop crying because he didn't want her to take him. I think this belongs here because after some of the things I read, I needed something to cheer me up, so thank you. This happened to my sister. Ever since she was a toddler, she was fascinated by cooking and was gradually becoming a fairly accomplished baker. To this day, she is one of the best cooks I know. As a treat for her Girl Scout troop, she made a complex multi-level cake that was supposed to represent a local landmark that her troop talked about often. Our mother helped a little, but she did most of the work. She was super proud of the result and brought it into school to show her class. For a 9-year-old, it was truly impressive. All of her classmates hooted and awed over it, and the cake was then taken into the teacher's lounge for safekeeping. My sister and my mother would pick it up when school ended, as our mother was going to drive her directly to her Girl Scout meeting. I don't know for sure if this influenced what happened next, but my sister's teacher never liked my sister for some reason. I was never sure why. Anyhow, when my sister and mother brought the cake into the class, they were both quite clear that the cake was for her Girl Scout troop that night, and my sister just wanted to show off. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but out of those words the teacher heard this cake was a gift to me. During my lunch I should eat some of it and cut pieces off here and there and pass them out to my fellow teachers. After lunch the teacher made a point of complimenting my sister in front of the whole class that the cake was delicious and she should be proud. My sister burst into tears and ran from the room. It took her a while to calm down. As she was trying to regain her composure, the teacher called my mom to complain that my sister needed to learn how to take a compliment better. My mother left work and drove to the school. She met with the teacher and the principal privately. Then she gathered up what was left of the cake. It had been butchered into an unrecognizable mess, and took my sister home. My sister spent most of the day and night crying. I don't know what was said in the meeting, but the next day the teacher apologized in front of the class, my sister, the principal, and my mother. For the rest of the year she tried, and largely failed, to be nicer. She didn't return to the school the next year, and I'm confident my mother had something to do with that. I didn't witness this, but I heard it from my son and his classmates. Apparently, a substitute teacher made my left-handed son write with his right hand. In 2018, she also made us stand at the board in front of class and practice writing his 3, 7, and 9 the correct way. He's in 4th grade and of normal intelligence, so he shouldn't be writing his numbers backwards anymore, but he does. It's an occupational disability and we're working on it. Did she think she would suddenly cure him by forcing him to practice? Like nobody had thought of making him practice before? WTF. She should definitely be reported. That is horrifying behavior for a human being of any profession, much less a substitute teacher. Sorry your kiddo went through that. This is a bit of WTF by both my son and his teachers. First, a bit of background. He was in early preschool from age 3 to try kickstart speech language and also for socialization. He didn't start speaking until he was 4. It seemed like he just didn't have any use for speech until then, because when he jumped from single words to full sentences in about a week. 6 months later he had taught himself to read on Skids.org. I'd set up an old laptop so it could only run Firefox and could only go to Skids. Everything else redirected to Skids. So shortly after he started reading, we get a call from his speech therapist. I'm concerned that name is starting to backslide in speech. He has started speaking gibberish all the time in class. This is a big deal. Backslides are very scary to see in an autistic child because they may never progress back to or beyond where they were. We start asking questions. What is he saying? What sounds is he making, etc. After a couple of minutes it clicks and my wife asks if he is saying stuff like Niheoma, Wei, Ziexia, QNG, Bokeka. There was silence for a few seconds and then, how did you know? Yeah, he's speaking Mandarin. He speaks in repeated phrases from what he hears from TV and movies. He's been watching a lot of Niheo Kailan on Nick Jr. This was the first call. Next was we're concerned that name is depressed. This one didn't even require questions. He's fine. He's just repeating Chicken Little. I was at a butterfly house our community sponsored with food trucks and arts and crafts for the children. I walked my 2 girls over to the coloring station so they can color their paper butterflies. My wife walked my other kid over to look at the beehives. A lady was sitting in the child-size seat holding a baby and talking to her kid about random stuff. I'm fairly antisocial unless you spark a conversation. I will engage. Until then I won't pay you much mind. My kids as well as the lady are coloring their crafts for a few minutes when her kid runs off. Moments later she says beautiful day today. AWW here we go. Yes it's lovely. Weather is almost perfect I reply. She continues small talk and I engage until I realize she hasn't looked at me once. Every interaction is directed to my two girls. It was almost as if I was Bruce Willis in Sixth Sense. She wasn't talking to me at all. That's when I noticed the baby she was holding was porcelain. The full-size carriage next to her had another porcelain doll strapped in with a bottle in its lap. Her kid came running over. The curly hair I noticed earlier was not that of a girl. The kid was a boy and immediately complained how this place sucked. Kids, say bye-bye to the nice lady, I said. The lady looked disappointed but continued coloring her butterfly alone. When I was a kid we lived in an Asian country where my dad was assigned to work. My brother was born while we were there, and by the time he was a toddler he had a full head of blonde curls. This caught the attention of many locals because blonde hair was a rare sight there. My mum went out for coffee one day with him in his stroller. A random man came over and sat at the table next to her. He didn't say anything. He just stared at my brother. Mum tried to talk to him and ask him WTF was his problem, but he just kept staring. She left pretty quickly. My mom's boyfriend has never had kids, but has a ton of nieces and nephews. So you'd think he'd know how to interact with my kids, right? Once, he came out of the kitchen, yelled look guys and put a freaking plastic bag over his head. I had to explain to him why not to do that. Another time, we were camping, and he yelled look guys again, and began throwing large rocks at our tent. Again, confused about why I was concerned. He's not allowed to be alone with my kids. My parents always loved to tell the story of when we were on a cruise in the Caribbean. I was about 10 months old and crying hysterically when a large Jamaican woman approached my parents and shouted, "The baby want your titty. Give baby the titty." We were visiting Galveston TX when my daughter was 2. She looked like a doll. Big blue eyes and bouncy curly hair. The entire day Hispanic people would come up to her and give her money. I would say oh thank you but that's not necessary. To which they kept saying yes it is custom. Good luck to give beautiful children money. At the end of the day she had 50.00. Is this a common custom? I live in Midland, TX and there are plenty of Latinos here. They must be from a different country than Mexico. Here they'll smile and ask to touch my daughter. Many believe that if they don't touch her they'll give her ojo, make her fussy. I grew up around it so it doesn't bother me much if they ask first. When my daughter, 7 at the time, played soccer this other parent would yell at my daughter about how she played. I admit she wasn't the best player, but this was a non-competitive recreation league where they were learning the skills, not playing at David Beckham level. The way he screamed at his daughter was even worse. Unfortunately officials would not ban him from games because my husband and I were the only ones who complained. He yelled at every kid and the other parents were too afraid to stand up to the jerk. My daughter is now 9 and doesn't play soccer. Found out last year she has flat feet and ankle problems that made it hard for her to keep up in soccer. She found another sport she lives and excels at, state level, and most of the parents are chill. My son has no issue in soccer and I'm glad. Most soccer parents suck. My mild creepy as Fouquet former Phil took my 10-month-old daughter to JCPenney's and had family portraits done of the 3 of them including Christmas cards from their family to yours. Matching outfits even. Thought that was super strange. Fast forward a couple weeks. They took a pic of him in a bathing suit in the tub my daughter him taking a bath. The 2 incidents just added up to some weird feelings for me. My Mill is a mental health counselor and when I said I wouldn't let them watch my daughter anymore she said I had mental issues and needed to seek help. Not a parent but my sister is 13 years younger than me. I remember when my mother, my baby sister, and I would go out shopping, everyone would ask me, the at the time 13-year-old, inappropriate questions about me and my baby. Didn't matter if my mom was pushing the buggy, holding my sister, whatever. She was always my baby according to complete strangers. And just for your information, my mother has always looked 15 years younger than she is so I have no idea how people didn't connect the dots that my sis was hers. It got so bad that my mom had to issue a rule that I had to walk a foot or more away from my sister when out in public. We had to do this for a year so people would leave me alone. One day my family and I went to a restaurant. Dad and I sat on the same side of the booth and mom sat on the other side so she could put her purse and diaper bag next to her. We pulled up a high chair for my sister at the end of the table. Mom goes to the bathroom. The waitress comes by, looks at me, at 14, my dad, my baby sister, and then back at my dad and I. Oh, you two make such beautiful babies. I thought my dad was going to throw up. I just remember feeling sick to my stomach. My dad quickly told her that I was his 14-year-old daughter and the baby was my sister, his daughter. The waitress turned 60 shades of red, barely talked to us the whole time. Not a parent, but when I was 4 I was in a Christmas shop with my mom and I spent 15 minutes decorating the front of my overalls with these little clip-on tree ornaments and was quite pleased with myself. I heard my mom calling and walked over to her when a store employee intercepted me and started screaming at me for stealing the ornaments. My mom rushed over and tried to calm the woman down, but she kept insisting that my mom remove all my clothes to make sure I didn't have any stuff stashed. I was 4. More how a stranger interacts with their own child, and I got the story secondhand. My wife was in a Hobby Lobby with our infant son. A woman sees my wife and leans over to her young daughter and loudly says, "See, that's why you don't have sex until you're married." The problem is that while my wife is petite and takes good care of her skin, she was 29 and had been married for 5 years when my son was born. She stopped and said, "Excuse me, what?" and the woman just tutted and ran off to another aisle. It's been 11 years and I still fantasize about telling that bee off if I had been there. My daughter loves babies and other kids. She calls out baby proudly whenever she sees one. A lady in a cafe told me to watch out as you don't want her to start too young, implying she wants to get pregnant. My daughter was 18 months old. I think I said the WTF I was thinking loudly. When my son was about a month old, we were driving back to see our parents' grandparents and spent the night in a hotel. While carrying my son in a baby wrap at the free breakfast, a lady asked me how big he would get. Dumbfounded, I just said I didn't know. Then I looked around and saw all the dogs. It was a lack winter. Pets stay free. Reading these brought back a memory of a creep creeping on my friends and I during middle school. There's a large lake everyone goes to with stones covering the banks. We were being kids and tossing the stones into the lake when this 60-70-year-old man comes running out of the woods with a video camera saying he got us all on tape and he was going to call the police because those are the lake's rocks. What in the frick was he doing in the woods videotaping us? My husband and I were shopping at Walmart once and had our 4-year-old daughter with us. My hubs is a big, burly biker dude with tattoos. We were leaving the store and he was holding her hand as we were walking to our car when out of nowhere, this crazy Bible thumping lady ran up to us, snatched our daughter's free hand, trying to drag her away from us. She started yelling about how my husband was an abomination and we were going straight to heck and she was taking this precious child away from you and your evil ways so that she can be taught the glory of God. Needless to say, that crazy bee dang near met Jesus that day. My brother decided to try and take a video of a diaper change and make my son the butt of some sexual jokes. When we laid down boundaries, my family freaked out and got offended that we were treating my brother as a threat. My brother was probably about 9 at the time. He's skipping rocks at the beach when he by accident hits a woman with one of them. When my brother tearfully tried to apologize, the woman's husband goes insane. He tried to grab him, so my brother runs and the man chases him across the beach. My poor brother is petrified, screaming and running back to us with a 45-plus-year-old man chasing behind him. My aunt ran to meet him, picks him up, and this man actually tried to grab him from my aunt's arms. We had to call the cops because he would not stop trying to grab my brother when no one would stand aside to allow him to beat a child's butt. Turns out his wife must have been fine because they got out of there real fast before the cops showed up. Parents of Reddit, when did you realize you had spoiled your child, Ren, to the point that they would need serious help to not grow up an entitled jerk? And did you make changes to how you parent from that point forward? Having been abused and neglected as a child, I vowed not to make the same mistake with my own kid. I made a bunch of different ones instead. I didn't discipline her enough. because the only kind of discipline I knew was physical abuse and I refused to do that. In trying to do better I went in the opposite direction, and by the time she was about 4 years old she was a spoiled, tyrannical brat. My husband had worked long hours and wasn't home a lot, and she usually behaved well for him, so he was largely ignorant of what was going on. He eventually got permission to work from home a couple days a week, and that's when he realized how bad things were. He gently took me aside and pointed out that a 4-year-old should not be screaming at their parents after having been asked to perform a simple task. I got therapy to help work through my own issues, and together my husband and I came up with a strategy that allowed me to discipline our daughter without physical punishment. It took a few tries before we found a strategy that worked. Then COVID happened and now my husband works from home 4 days a week, which has helped immensely. Our daughter is still spoiled, but her behavior has improved a lot over the last few years to the point that she's usually pleasant to be around. LOL. She and I are both a work in progress, but so far the whole family is doing better. Thank you for breaking the cycle of abuse for your child. You may have overcorrected, but you've still made an absolutely essential improvement. I was a nanny for several years at one point. Generally speaking, parents realized they needed to make a change when they saw how someone else interacted with their child and how positive saying no and setting boundaries could be. I cared for many lovely, kind families who simply wanted the best for their children and don't really know how to say no. They want their children to have everything they don't did, and so they just lavish on appeasement after appeasement. Great method when you want to be the spoiling auntie uncle friendo, but not when you need to be the parent. It almost always dawned on them when my care time would overlap when they were home, when they would go back and watch cameras, or when I would be present as support for family kid outings. Basically just when they could see in action how their child responded. Most of the time, they just assumed their child was equally testy with me as with them. For one family, it happened to be that mum was leaving for work the same time I was getting kiddo, who was about 4 ready to go to the park. We went nearly every day and kid knew that part of that routine was that they had to put their own shoes on, something they apparently refused to do for the parents. Kid saw mum still there and started in on a tantrum. I saw mum jump up, in the middle of being late and stressed herself, to start to help because kid was demanding she put kid's shoes on. I stepped in, just put myself in the middle of line of sight, and gently explained to kid that they put their own shoes on for the last 3 weeks, that mum was busy putting her own shoes on, and how kid putting their own shoes on was the rule for going to the park. Besides, wouldn't mum be so proud to see them do it all by themselves? Wouldn't it feel so good to know mum was able to go to work on time because kid was such a big kid who could take care of themselves? Kid stopped mid-fuss and brightly said, yeah, and proceeded to put their own shoes on. Then I just doubled down with the praise. Took all of 30 seconds, but mum was shocked and over the next week, asked many questions about how I set boundaries and expectations. I'm not a perfect caregiver. No one is, and it's much easier to set and enforce boundaries with children that you ultimately give back to their parents. Personally, it's why I think having a small variety of trusted caregivers, whenever possible, is ideal. That aside, it's literally human biology for children, and people in general, to be highly adaptable. They like structure and reason, within their emotional wheelhouse, and will thrive if you just give them a direction to go that allows them to process how they feel and develop perspective jumping off from that feeling. I started a relationship with a wonderful woman who puts everyone else first. She has a heart of gold and is the sweetest person I have met. However, this desire to make everyone happy is not how you parent children. She has a moderately autistic child who is 15 and another child who is 13. She created an environment where they rely on her for everything. The 13-year-old can't even make himself toast. The 15-year-old did whatever he wanted because she was more concerned about him being happy than being independent. So far, I've gotten the child with autism to wear underwear, stop peeing anywhere he wants, stop abusing his mom, to begin feeding himself finger foods, and in general, to listen if we ask him to do something. I need to work on the youngest one to start making himself food and to eat something other than just frozen chicken strips and french fries. I work with children who have autism, and that is not mild autism. They should be in a program to help them learn basic life skills. My husband had this realization a couple of weeks ago about his oldest. He was shocked when we were at the store and I said no to our toddler. He said okay and didn't whine. I praised him for listening, and at that moment my husband was like, holy crap. I think he's more confident and independent than his teen sister. I done effed up with her, haven't I? I just shrugged. Would have to be when my daughter was 15. I set up credit card account for her, set the limit to $500 and told her the card was only for emergencies, such as if she was out somewhere and needed an Uber home. Got the bill the first month. The card had been run to its limit, $125 at a beauty salon, $200 at various clothing stores and multiple fast food runs. So I sit her down and say, didn't I tell you this card was for emergencies? She looked me in the eye and calmly said, yes, and that's all I used it for. I reply, and getting your hair done and a sale at Hot Topic are emergencies? She replies, yes, for someone my age, they are. Needless to say, her credit card was quickly revoked. Makes me miss the Google Wallet card. Basically a prepaid debit card, which makes more sense to me as a thing to give to a kid in this situation. Not one of those parents, but my mom never learned. She has spoiled my younger sister since she was a toddler. Sister is now in her mid-40s and is still an entitled B. To make things even better, my mother has been the childcare provider, free childcare, for all three of my sister's kids from the time each was born. So now, not only are my nieces and nephew being raised by a narcissist mom, but by their grandmother that made their mom that way in the first place. The last Christmas we went to their house, which was years ago now since it was that bad, all three kids were in various stages of meltdowns because they didn't get what they wanted, and that was the year the kids got brand new iPhones. The oldest was 9, the middle was 7, and the youngest was 5. It's funny listening to our mom be confused about how they are all spoiled brats. I wouldn't say I spoiled her myself. I traveled a lot and just wasn't there for my daughter as much as I should have been. My ex-wife, my mom, my mill all spoiled the heck out of my daughter. I came to the realization after my divorce. I had my daughter for the weekend. She was 4.5 at this point. Not potty trained yet because God forbid she did something that was different. I remember sitting on the floor, trying to get her to use a potty, and she's just yelling at me that she wants her diapers back. When she went back to her mother's house, I get a phone call from my ex, yelling at me for trying to make her use the potty when she wasn't ready. My daughter was 4.5 years old. At that point I knew. Did some research, called a behavior specialist and started to get her on the right track. I love her and she's a pretty amazing child. She's still spoiled as heck. I can only do so much with the time I have with her. I realized that, because my daughter was so difficult, I have since found out she has ADHD and autism, like me or her mum. I was letting my son away with so much more than I would her. It was my fiance that pointed out to me that I was letting him walk all over me for an easy life so I could focus on my youngest, and we have made huge changes in the way we discipline him, and as a result he is back to the delightful young man he was in the earlier days. I owe a lot to my fiance actually. Not a parent, but a spoiled child. My parents have already given me a lot that I need, physically. They're upper middle class, paid for my education, my car insurance, repairs. They're even helping me pay for my breast reduction. But when I was a freshman in college, I really realized how spoiled I am. I got into a volunteer group that helped low-income families, and I realized how well off I am. Especially when I started dating my BF. He doesn't have health insurance, and he had to pay for his college himself without parents' help. It saddens me that there are people that live like that. A lot of people who don't have a lot of disposable income. Seeing people who had to drop classes housing because they can't afford it. I tell my parents that I want to at least pay for my student loans. That are $20k. My BF. We have been together over 2 years and talk about marriage, is going to school for occupational therapy, and will come out with over $150k in loans, so my dad wants to pay off my loan so we'll be better off. My dad even wants to buy me a new, not brand new, car when I am done school. Even the stuff I want to pay for like my car oil changes and my repairs, but my dad pays for it before I have the chance to. I'm thankful. but at the same time my mom holds it over me that they pay for all my stuff and I feel terrible. I cry at night sometimes thinking about the fact that if my BF had a terrible accident or a serious medical problem he won't be able to pay it off. I hope I am not a jerk, but I know when I move out and I am on my own it will be hard to adjust and he still might pay things for me. I try so hard not to be spoiled but I still worry. I think I am entitled but I am trying so hard not to be. I know this is kind of off topic, but this is my viewpoint and my worries. I just want to pay for some things myself, you know? You sound like a kind, insightful person who might be pampered, but isn't spoiled. I am so thankful that I grew up watching my auntie freak up so much with my cousins. They were so vile because she allowed them to be. She would ask them what they wanted for breakfast, lunch or dinner and they would each choose something different from each other. Then when she had cooked it and served them they decided they wanted something else. This would go on and on until about 4 meals had been dumped. My kids help me choose the weekly meals but there is no faffing. They eat or they don't, but if they don't finish at least the veg and one other thing then they don't get anything else or pudding. My cousins used to scream that they wanted stuff from every shop we went in, full on Paddy in the middle of the store until she gave in. But the first time my oldest tried this I calmly dragged him round the shop screaming whilst I put everything in the basket back, then picked him up and walked home without getting anything. My other 2 boys learned off their brother's mistake. My cousins would run riot anytime we were out of the house running into roads. My auntie screaming like a banshee. My boys were on reins from the start. Then once they proved they could hold hands without darting, the reins were taken off, then eventually they could walk next to me without holding hands. We used the traffic lights game so they could run ahead and the moment I said stop they calmly waited until I caught up. Everything I did when they were small has made them absolutely amazing kids, teenagers now. I have had people commenting on how well behaved and how helpful and polite my babies are, and I must admit I do look at them every now and then amazed at how I could be so blessed to have 3 absolutely amazing beautiful boys that I absolutely adore. Before anyone says that I don't know what it's like with a child with a disability, the normal response I get when I blame the parents for bad behavior: my middle boy is autistic and dyspraxic with a mental delay and health problems. My youngest is also autistic but undiagnosed because he doesn't need extra help like my middle boy does. They are now 14, 13 and 11 and we have a fantastic relationship. All 3 are happy and healthy. To me that's a win as a parent. Not a parent but a sibling. I'm the oldest of 3. My youngest sibling is 4 and he will walk around demanding everything from both of his parents. His dad will give him whatever he wants and our mom will either ignore my brother or yell at him. The middle kid, my sister who is 13 BTW, will throw a screaming fit whenever she doesn't get what she wants. And my mom retaliates by screaming back at her, grounding her for a certain amount of time, and then just forget about it. Meaning my sister just continues to do whatever she wants. When I go to tell my mom that my sister is still grounded, she will just get frustrated with me and ignore me. Neither my mom or my brother's dad do anything to try and change how either of my siblings act. They think I'm the spoiled one. BC, I've got severe mental problems and have no motivation for anything. So when I sleep in late, BC, I can't get up, they yell at me for being lazy. My mom yelled at me the other day for asking to go to therapy once a week instead of every other week. Also the oldest and had siblings who acted similar to yours, and I was also the one with mental health issues. Things got a lot better once I got out of the house. My siblings ended up turning out normal too somehow. So I feel for you and hope it gets better for you like it did for me. I am 20 years old, but my mother's family is full of people with bad behavior and who destroyed their lives. My uncle, the firstborn, does not know how to work. He is irresponsible, unfaithful and is supported by his girlfriend. This is a consequence of the fact that my grandmother never gave him responsibilities and even gave him doing her homework. When he got to college, he left it and is self-conscious about it. I never spent time with her son because of his infidelity and his lack of employment. My grandmother raised him just like her son. So my cousin doesn't have a stable job either. He left university twice and his dream is to get everything easy. My aunt, the second, was glorified by her mother and no matter how much damage she caused to the rest, everything was fine. She joined the Navy of my country and married a lawyer. She and her husband are being prosecuted for tax evasion and I have not heard from them since. That was so serious that her son had to run away and they almost locked up my grandmother and confiscated my cell phone because my grandmother sent all the tax documents and bribes on my cell phone. My mother, the youngest, grew up relatively alone. My grandmother beat her, let my great uncles and great uncles take advantage of her. My aunt threw her out of a third floor window. My uncle told her she was adopted and not one she told her she wanted to, and one of my grandmother's brother raped her. He grew up with her paternal uncle, a priest, because he was the only one who loved her. When she went to university she was forced to study something she did not want, and when she left her, they treated her like the worst of all. My grandmother did the same to me. As my mother worked to support my grandmother and me, I also grew up with the priest uncle, who gave me the strength to continue. The stories are repeated, almost as an inheritance. I hope I can break the chain. Currently I have been estranged from my grandmother because she hates me for not studying what she wanted. My family is full of stories like this from my great many great grandparents. The good thing is that I get away from my family. Boy, that was a tough read. I'm sorry for the horrible things that happened to your mom, and I really wish for you to live a better life, far away from this toxic pit of garbage humans. My daughter was throwing a fit that her bottle of water was not the brand she wanted, so someone asked her why she didn't just drink tap water. Her response was, "What's tap water? She's 10. Now I'm curious if it was Voss." I'm not a parent, but rather the oldest sibling. I have to do a lot of the stuff around the house because my mother is a single mother who works nights and sleeps during the day, and my two siblings don't help at all and they make big messes, and my sister, which is the youngest and has microcephaly, gets pretty much whatever she wants and gives me an attitude, and my brother is a snob, but he's getting better. My mom and dad are split and they cannot come to terms with anything, but I tell my mom it's probably best for them to go live with him because his wife is more strict and they would get on track. Plus there they have more siblings that aren't as mean as me. When I realized I was an enabler to my 9-year-old son, he was always difficult and would refuse to go to school, clean up, shower or do anything I would ask of him. All he did was ask me for toys and I would give in, using it as a bribe for him to go to school or start listening, etc. This went on his whole life. It was getting worse till I realized that my buying him toys was just a patch on a deeper issue, which was him suffering from anxiety and depression. I just hated seeing him so sad or angry, and loved his happy face when he got a new toy. A year ago I took him to a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with anxiety and depression. He's been on meds ever since, and has barely asked for toys, is happy, goes to school and is a pleasure to be around. I swear to God, if I didn't get him diagnosed and carried on as his enabler, I don't know where he would be as a teen or adult. Thank you for getting your child the help he needs. The stigma against getting kids medicated is so strong, but it can literally save lives. My first was an only child for over a decade. Whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. I had no problem with this since he was my only baby. I did not realize the damage until I got pregnant again and he had a hard time accepting the new reality of his life. He fought hard to go against it. It took lots of patience, love and therapy for him to understand having a sibling could be great, as he is loved as much as his new sibling. Today he is the most loving, caring big brother ever. I got a new car at the end of last year when my daughter was almost 15. I kept my old one, 2011 Buick Enclave, for several months thinking it would probably make a good first car for her. When I mentioned it to her, she literally said nope, I'm not going to drive that thing, in the most embarrassingly entitled way. So I sold it, and now rather than a free old car, she's going to have to buy her very own old car, and pay for the insurance. Thankfully she has a job and some time to save her pennies, but she's learning the hard way that my offer was pretty generous and her snotty attitude was all it took for me to rescind it. Haha, excellent. With the pandemia, and having to be at home all the time, we bought a lot of things to our 4-year-old. Books, a trampoline, some toys. One day he got super upset because he wanted something and we said no. We decided we'll give him gifts only on his birthday, Children's Day and Christmas. My sister is 9 years old and my parents are divorced. My dad is a fantastic guy but is much more strict than my mom. So when my sister is over at his house she behaves like a little angel. but the second she goes to my mom's house she becomes an entitled jerk and screams at my mom for asking her to get off of her iPad and come down for dinner. I've tried to tell my mom she needs to be stopped, but my mom hasn't realized this yet, so I've just been sitting in my room listening to this crap waiting for the day my mom finally decides to punish my sister. You are just me in another family. I have the same thing with my sister, but worse. I hope parents that have spoiled their kids read this thread. Every other post has a common theme, being parents giving kids whatever they want and enabling them. Stop. Don't always give them something. Teach them something. Hopefully parents reading this learn from others' mistakes. Not a parent but babysat my cousins. They were waited on hand and foot by their mom. My younger cousin was about 3 at the time. My mom and I were making them lunch when he said, "I want milk." My mom replied, "In a minute, sweetie." He made a really pee-off face. I said, "I want milk," he said. My mom just turned to look at him and said, "Excuse me, those kids are a little less rotten today, but not by much." I remember the day my dad realized he fricked up with my younger sister. I don't remember exactly what she said, just that she was being a huge BTCH for something trivial, and my dad was kind of blown away by her response. Looks at me and goes, "Dang. I guess I shouldn't have acted like she could do no wrong when you all were little." Frick my life, right? I just threw my hands up in the air and was like, "Yeah, you fricked that up." When my elder daughter, 11, wanted to commit suicide, BCS I ain't wanted to buy her the new Samsung Galaxy S21 Plus. I ain't make that money in 2 months. 2, though. Why the heck? I'm 100% sure it's a waste. I mean, it won't be used by full performance. 3. Only BCS it's trend. So she overdosed herself with Flintstone gummies. She took 3 PCS instead of 1. And now we sit at the dining table waiting her to die. Dark. Not a parent, not that old, but a family friend's kid. The little crap is like 9 and is generally more of an butthole than I am at 17 and am very p. He regularly talks crap to people who are more than twice as old, physically harms other kids his age, not seriously but come on, and acts very spoiled, the drop of a hat. And his parents complain IDK how he got so spoiled. Da dumbass, it's kinda your fault. Yo, I remember being 4. Thought I was king of the pile, was able to get away with everything, especially since the family members were into serious work stuff. The day I had 22 teeth removed is when my mom stuck her foot down and forced me to go to the dentist. Wore metal for a year, pretty cool TBH. That's how I became aware I had to change, and when all the stuff I got away with caught up to me. My 8-year-old once complaining about not flying first class business class to the EU. He turned out to be a good kid and not too spoiled. Haha, wild child. It's hard to break the cycle. Now have teenagers blaming me for not wanting to clean up because that's how I raised them. You do for, and if you don't change expectations when they can reach the counter, washer, dryer, hamper, it becomes an uphill battle. I'm guilty of just taking care of it because I can't stand the mess and or smell. Add on having 5 houses and losing all of them but the one they were raised in through divorce, and hearing why bother being on a lake without a boat. Have 2 non-working. As a mom who made all the money, robbed from her CPA husband, and statement from my child. I totally fricked up, hoping to change over next few years. Already done. Made them get good grades and didn't give them everything they ever wanted. Rewarded good behavior and grades with freedoms that adults enjoy, like a driver's license and a car, cell phones, etc. But only if used responsibly. I knew this was the way to raise them, as that is how I was raised, except for the good grades thing. Both are high paid professionals and very happy in life. Not me, but my mill. She never said no to any of her children, my husband included. She always said yes to anything her kids wanted, because she just wanted the kids to be happy. She was divorced twice, and has also barely worked a day in over 30 years, so she's pretty much also mooched off other people for her entire life. From a psychological perspective, it's been fascinating to see how the lack of discipline played out in each child. I'll start with my husband. He definitely made some mistakes during his younger years, and definitely shows ADHD tendencies. I think he was actually diagnosed during childhood, but his parents bickered over treatment, So procrastination is something he struggles with significantly. Now is his early 30s. He is also having to teach himself discipline. My sister-in-law, despite odds, is extremely driven and motivated. Recently got her master's degree and is stubborn to a fault. That said, stubborn to a fault also has darker meaning, not just positive ways. She tends to be rather self-centered and is stubborn to the point where she, more or less, has horse blinders in. She's so in her own world and priorities that she doesn't really seem to care about other people. If it isn't about her, her new husband and soon-to-be baby, or her new in-laws, she's newly married and pregnant. Forget about it. It's like nobody else exists. My brother-in-law, who is in his early 20s, is on his way to becoming the creepy 40-year-old virgin living in mom's basement. Barely made it through high school and flunked out of community college. We urged him to take gen eds at the community college, in person, before transferring to a state school. Of course, he went against guidance shared, and took 2 gen eds online, math and English, as well as a few music classes, which he strongly vouched for. Not only did he fail math and English, he also flunked the music class, the same music class that was once a week at 5 PM. But what do he and my mill do? Blame the professor for his failing the class. They claimed she was strict about attendance. The community college was on a grant free because our state recently passed legislation making community college free for first-time college students. His grandparents also offered to pay for a 4-year institution, full ride. So, he wasted 2 great opportunities. My Bill is basically wasting his life away. Plays video games all night and sleeps during the day. My Mill coddled and enables him like you wouldn't believe. Parents, say no to your kids. Frequently and freely. Discipline them. Be assertive with them. They may throw a little hissy fit now, but they'll appreciate it when they're older. Just my 2 cents. Mums of Reddit, what do you know about your child that you will never tell to him, huh? She was conceived because I really wanted an iced cappuccino from Tim Hortons. He didn't feel like driving, so I made him a deal. It actually ended pretty nicely in a field under a clear night sky with many stars out. Traded fricking for coffee. Heck, I live in Seattle and that crap doesn't even happen here. Clearly I'm in the wrong Seattle. Stay at home dad. Here, I'm hoping that I never have the need to tell my kids that 2 out of the 3 served jail time in utero. Dude, and to Partham street cred. I'll never tell my dear son that I follow every fricking single comment he makes on Reddit and that I'm the one who gives him the golds. Poor kid will always think that he's a such funny person. Not my kid, but at a family party my cousin who was 3 or 4 at the time needed a pee. The party was a buffet and when his dad took him to the toilet he discovered that the kid had been secretly threading hula hoop crisps onto his dong. Not sure how well this translates for non-UK people. I will never, ever tell my daughter that when she was 1 week old I accidentally threw her across the room onto a wood floor. It was about 2 AM. I was breastfeeding her in the living room and a huge spider crawled on my arm. The whole new baby late at night thing made me stupid. So my reaction was to use the arm I was holding the baby and to get the spider off my other arm. My little girl went flying. It was horrible. She was fine, though, completely unharmed, just kind of pee off. No one tell her. You can't just offer your baby to a spider to make it go away. My son's grandparents have custody of him in Australia. His mother and I were a one-time fling on a beach in North Carolina along with another girl at the same time. She went to prison for trafficking large quantities of drugs in Australia, which is a major offense over there. I think she's serving 25 to life or something. One day I was called by the Australian version of Child Services telling me that I need to come pick up my son. I didn't even know that I had a son until then. He was 7 at the time. Apparently what had happened was she put my name down on his birth certificate and kept my contact info on a bookmark that hung from her rearview mirror. His grandparents came and got him. They tell him that his daddy is off fighting in the war and I've only spoken with him twice. I have sent over my part of a paternity test a few times to see if he is actually mine or not, but his grandparents keep ignoring them. I think they're afraid that I will just show up one day and take him away. He doesn't really know me and it would be awkward for me to take custody of a 12-year-old that I don't even know if he is mine or not. I think he's gonna be pee when he finds out the truth. So I took a leather-bound journal and wrote out all the things about me that I think he should know, along with the real story about why I wasn't around. I've included several stories about me and my time in the army, my travels, and a lot of good advice covering many situations that he may find himself in, complete with glossary and index. I wrapped up this journal along with my own dog-eared copy of the Ranger Handbook with my own notes written in, an old set of my dog tags, and a way to contact me. I sent it to a lawyer's office in Australia with instructions to deliver it to him on his 18th birthday. I'm looking forward to the Reddit post about his delivery when the time comes. Holy crap, I was expecting this to get buried. Thanks for all the replies, reminders, gold, and support. This post really is the TLDR. I've made multiple attempts to the grandparents, but I'm always ignored. I've only gotten through when I've called on his birthday, and that was just twice. I know who my father is, but I kinda wish I could have found out by a mystery lawyer turning up with a weathered, dusty package full of stamps, asking me to sit down. Hoa. From a son's pov, but my mom, and the rest of my family, have hidden from me that my older brother is only my half-brother, same mom, my entire life so far, and they think I don't know, but I overheard my grandmother talking about it at a family reunion years ago. Same here, there's so much evidence that I can't not know, but they still won't tell me. That I know he is suicidal. I fear if I let him know that he'll go through with it or be too ashamed to speak with me again. I understand the reasoning behind speaking with him about it or getting professional help, but please be aware that one treatment doesn't fit all. Not a mom, but my cousin doesn't know that he is a product of debauchery. My entire extended family knows, and as far as I know, nearly all of his cousins know aside from his own brother and sister. He was always treated special because of it, like if babying him will somehow make everything okay. He's turned out to be an entitled dickface because of it. This story was a roller coaster. Oh no, that's terrible. Well, at least his family made sure to love him. Oh no, he became an butthole. Years ago we had an awesome cat named Chosen One. We all loved this cat, but especially my oldest son, who, at the time, was just beginning to drive. He was about 17 or so. One day my son was leaving the house to go somewhere, and when he left he reached down and gave Chosen a little love, and out the door he went. Unbeknownst to him, the cat had followed him out the door, and for some reason the cat must have ran under the car. Nobody actually witnessed this event, so we're speculating on what exactly happened. So my son drives off, and a little while later I go outside, only find Chosen laying on the driveway curled up in a ball bed. We think the kitty ran under the car or was in front of the tire or something, and when my son drove away he ran over Chosen and killed him. We were all pretty upset, of course, and when my son came home we told him Chosen had been hit by a car in the road and died. We've never told him, and never will, that we're pretty sure he was the one that killed the cat. He'd blame himself and forever feel guilty about killing his favorite cat. Maybe change the name. My son wasn't planned, and I never ever wanted or planned to have kids. I fell pregnant accidentally. He will never ever be told this because my mum repeatedly told me I was an accident as a child, and it really fricked with me. Kid woke up. That's the end of my replies for a while. He's angry with his teeth and needs cuddles. I like to call my first son a wonderful surprise. He really was too. I walked in on my 5-year-old stepson with his pants down, rubbing the cat against his dong, saying, "Oh, that feels good." I said, "That's not what the cat is for." He was embarrassed. The cat hasn't been the same since. I'm imagining a cat with 1,000-yard stare. That cat has seen some crap. My daughter is not biologically my husband's. She was conceived with donor sperm. Hubby is sterile. I want to tell her because I think it's fair, just for medical reasons alone. Especially now considering she was born with a major heart defect. Hubby doesn't want to tell her. Might not ever. I don't think it would matter, but I would be devastated if it made her think less of my husband. She's only been with us a month, but he loves her so much. It would crush him. Anyway, yeah, that's our secret for her. I talked to my husband again and restated I wanted to tell her, and he did agree, but just wasn't sure about how to do it. She should probably know cause of medical history stuff. I didn't know something about my family and was misdiagnosed twice. Sadly, I'm pretty sure my mother has nothing to post here. She was awfully open about everything. From my stepdad's dong size to the inside joke about duck dongs she and my biological father had, or how she likes it rough, or what toys are good for what, or how much she really wishes I were gay, or how I was conceived because spermicidal gel isn't very effective, or how itchy her crotch is at any given time. Seriously, I wish my mom had at least one thing to post to this thread, but if she does, it could only be so terrifying it would break my psyche. He was conceived after we got lost trying to find a Halloween party at a friend's new place. We ended up just going home, but as I was already in the French maid costume it made perfect sense to get drunk and forget the birth control. I don't imagine we will ever tell him he was conceived inside a French maid costume. Actually, who am I kidding? We will totally bust this story out for his future spouse. Ruin that particular fantasy for him. P. When my first wife was 4 months pregnant, she was diagnosed with stage 3/4 breast cancer. At 18 weeks the doctor gave her a few choices. Her best chance of survival was to abort the baby and have aggressive chemo. We talked about it, and she decided to try and carry our son to term. They delivered our son healthy about 6 weeks early. She died about 5 months after he was born. I have since remarried and he is now almost 18. I don't plan on telling him that she saved him at her expense. It was a tough time and I don't blame him, and never have. After her mastectomy and a lengthy biopsy, she was found to have an extremely aggressive type of breast cancer. In fact, we later found out it had spread considerably. The treatment would have been in vain. Even if we had aborted, her life expectancy would probably have been less than 2 years. We made the choice to keep him before we knew this. Invasive treatments and MRI multiple x-rays would have put some risk on my son. So we took a choice. He knows she died of cancer, and he knows it was soon after he was born, but not the details. He never knew his mum. He does not grieve for her. It's cold, but true. She has written to him a number of letters, the first of which he gets at 18, the next at 21 and the final one when he gets married. They are sealed and private. I have no wish to open them, but it remains possible that she will detail what happened, although I think it's unlikely, as before she died she made me promise protect him from the pain of her illness and decision. Dad here. I know what he's doing with the butter and that's why I buy the store brand for him to make toast at night and leave my good butter alone. And there's a reason I bought our own rechargeable batteries, because it's nice to have any remote actually work when you try to use it. There's not a calculator in the world that goes through batteries like that. Not exactly a mom. I'm actually a son of a mother. But my mom has never told me that she had a baby before me. That baby had a female version of my name and died at I think 2 weeks old. She said she named me what she did because of some Norwegian thing, but I know it's after my sister. My grandma accidentally let it slip when I was like 17. I do wish my mom would tell me though. I'm actually a son of a mother. Oh my god, me too. That I found a treasure hunt he had created as a surprise for his girlfriend on their anniversary. One of the clues was that she should go to the place where he first fricked her in the butt. I should add, they were both adults when they first met, so whatever they do in their private lives is their business only. But I could never unsee that note. I will never tell my son that his biological dad tried to kill us and himself when I was 6 weeks pregnant because he didn't want to be a dad. For the people who are asking if I got pregnant without his consent or against his will, I don't think you really understand where babies come from. I know he injured at least 2 people, and was injured himself at least once at political rallies that turned into a brawls. Some nights he would came home bleeding and with a black eye. He was a boxer, so I thought nothing of it, and I'm sure a few of those were boxing injuries. But I know he was hurt a few times in those political riots. Nearly a decade later, he moved out and of the country. Coincidentally, my husband and I finally decided it was time to pack up his old room and turn his bedroom into something else. We found a few things that linked him to local fascist groups. Just a few scraps he probably forgot to take with him. One of those things was an old newspaper clipping where I can clearly see him delivering a hard punch to the face of a political opponent. He's in a disguise, but I still recognize the clothes he was wearing. Then there was another picture from the same article where the guy he punched is laying on the ground and my son is getting ready to hit someone else. After we gathered everything incriminating, my husband and I decided to burn the evidence he left behind. Nothing could be gained by keeping those things. The articles were quite old, and my son moved to a new country that doesn't have his brand of fascism. My son followed a specific local type of fascism. Because so many people are asking, we're from a southern European country. It's been bad here for a while, and I'm worried that more of our young will turn to fascism. They always hear about their parents or grandparents talking about their youth, when the country was ruled by a dictator. They hear about how easy it was back then and how we had zero worries. The young people now need to worry about unemployment, debt, a dwindling population, and tensions with immigrants. We never had to worry about any of those things. Then from their families and from school they learn about how great we used to be. Then they step outside and they see how far we've fallen. We used to be great, but now everyone sees Southern Europe as a liability. I think it's easy for them to turn to fascism in an attempt to reclaim that greatness. I miss those years, but I think fascism and dictatorships should be left in the past. My 13-year-old son is very timid when it comes to approaching awkward subjects. I've raised him as a single mother, so he doesn't really have a father figure in his life. He has started to grow some facial hair, but it's being shaved. Except he doesn't have a razor, and it only seems to get shaved when I'm not home. So one day I'll leave one of my razors out to see if it changes position, and little do you know it does. I am going to buy him an electric razor as soon my financial situation permits, but I don't think I'm going to confront him about this. That her first daycare auntie when she was aged 2-3 and going to her home every day was murdered by her husband a year later. Dang colon. Went to use the bathroom and I left our 8-month-old on the rug. I found her in the walk-in closet gnawing on my corncob. Jesus Chrysler. She was teething and I left my goodie drawer open. Did I learn my lesson? Nope. 4 years later, last week, she found it in my underwear drawer and promptly asked why I had a dog bone. I've since thrown said corncob in the trash. Holy crap. I haven't used it since before she was even born. I stored it away sanitized, hot, soapy water. You sick fricks. Somewhere in a Missouri landfill is a rubber dong with balls. Boy wowing. Jesus. I swear kids are way smarter than they give off. They don't wanna do crap while you're watching them, but somehow when you turn around the baby is on the ceiling. Love my little boy. Sort of a meta thing, but my mum didn't tell me until right before she died that she knew I was destined to never hold a job or live an ordinary life. Her psychiatric background had long before determined I was schizotypical and prone to a pattern of atypical depression. She never told me until the end because she knew how important it was to sort myself out, rather than just be given a diagnosis. She told me that she was never disappointed in me and that even if I had problems, there'd still be a future for me. She was proud that I'd taken on the issues that I had so openly and never given up. Years later, I haven't improved much, but her encouragement and confidence in me still lingers. Whenever I'm in a truly bad place, she's still there in my head giving me comfort. Love ya, Mom. Not a mom here. When I was around 5, my aunt walked into the room while I had the nozzle of a bicycle pump on the tip of my dong. I was trying to pump air inside me to see if I would swell up like a balloon. I didn't know this until my mother told me about it a few years ago when we were having a chat about funny things that happened in the past. Luckily we do not live close to a bridge because I seriously thought about jumping. How could she think that this would be funny to me? I was mortified. Way I late, but here goes. When I was 16 I found this stash of beer in our basement fridge. Miller High Life I think. I drank some and thought it was utterly disgusting. Not like acquired taste bad, but rather what the frick, how do people drink this? My stomach is literally on fire. Hid the bottles to throw away at a later date. Crossed beer off my list of things I liked. Forget about said beer bottles. One day I remember and go to look for them where I hid them. Instead, a note. Vorkrist. Those beers were at least 8 years old. We removed them from grandma's fridge when we were cleaning her house. I won't tell your dad. Hope your first beer was memorable, Mom. I'm not a mother, but my grandma sure kept a secret that came to bite her in the butt. My cousin was adopted as a baby by my grandma because his parents were both mentally disabled and couldn't take care of him. My cousin still had a relationship with his dad until his dad died when he was 15. Well, over Christmas last year my cousin, now 23 years old, Ran into a random guy at a gas station who looked exactly like his late father. Guess you can say it didn't take long for them to realize they were half brothers, and that my grandma had known about this half brother the entire time, and yet had completely excluded him from all family functions for his entire life simply because he was adopted by a non-blood family. Needless to say, my cousin and grandma have yet to talk since New Year's, and I'm just starting to get to know a cousin that I never knew I had. Haha. TLDR. When my cousin was born, my grandmother adopted him at birth. His dad, my uncle, then died when cousin was in junior high. Cousin found long lost half brother at a gas station when he was 23. Found out grandmother knew about the brother the whole time but never said anything about it. Result, family drama. Everybody hates the grandmother, haha. It's about my sister, but when she was a baby my mother tried to give her away because she didn't want her. My dad found out and got her back from the woman. She is 21 and still doesn't know. We are human and we make mistakes, and my mom is also a human. Please stop calling her a C or anything else. My mom was suffering from postpartum depression as told by the Redditors, and now she is good and she loves her more than anything, and we three have decided to keep it as a secret from her till we die. That I wanted to give him to the fire station for a couple weeks. I didn't tell anyone until he was 2 weeks old because I thought it was something wrong with him and me. I didn't think I loved him and I was so ashamed. I ended up telling my husband in desperation one night and he snatched my son away, telling him that he'd find a mommy who actually loved him. Neither of us knew it was severe postpartum depression. I thought I was incapable of that love and my husband thought I was a monster. I am still battling the PPD and anxiety a year later, but I even now can't believe how much I love him. I love him so much it hurts. I'll never tell my son about that horrible night, but I will tell him that depression and anxiety are never ever shameful. When my son was about 10 months, there was a cricket on the floor by our patio door. This giant cricket was obviously the king of all the neighborhood crickets and had just fought a valiant fight against invading cricket pirates because he was missing a couple of legs. So, here I am holding the baby, thinking, okay brave cricket, you've gotta go cuz I'm really not trying to hear your braggart songs in the middle of the night. I put my son down and unlock the patio door only to look around in confusion because the cricket king has disappeared. Turns out my son had no sympathy for the king, his valiant fight, or his loyal subjects because just one thin cricket leg snaked its way out of my kid's tightly clamped maw. The best part was that as I tried to dig that bug back out of my kid's mouth, he struggled mightily, refusing to open up and ate every last bite. TLDR. My kid is man. He knows his protein. He spares no king. I am a single dad of a teenage boy and teenage girl. I know that they talk crap about me with each other when they are mad at me. I would never say anything because I want them to have a close bond forever. I know that they still love and respect me. Plus, there are tons of long showers at weird times throughout the day. To all of the freaks who keep asking, of course the showers are together with all three of us. When I was a teenager, a lot of times I would just sit down in the shower for like 30 minutes. I would never masturbate in there though. I had a laptop in my room. When I was a kid I was diagnosed as dyslexic. They told my mum so that she could help organize extra classes and stuff for me. My mum was cool with that as long as no one told me what they were for. She didn't want me using the excuse of being dyslexic. When I got to university and was training to be a tutor, I was told the early warning signs of dyslexia. Later I was chatting to my mum about my day and mentioned I thought it was odd I had so many of the warning signs. Then she casually said, oh, your teachers told me you were dyslexic when you were like 5. I just didn't tell you. You would have used it as an excuse. Thanks mum, I think. My daughter was conceived during a vacation weekend. Fantastic freaking sessions every night. All holes imaginable. Only one night we didn't use protection. I was so close to blackout drunk at one point I actually said, are you done yet? That was more than likely the night of our conception. What's the worst example of overbearing parents you've ever seen? Oh mine, here we go. When I was 14 my mom installed a monitoring software on my computer so she could see my screen on her laptop to make sure I was doing homework. I didn't know about this until I watched really kinky intense pee and I got screamed at from downstairs. When I was 18 I got my nose pierced, told her that I did it, and she freaked out and said she did not got me permission to do that and wait until dad hears about this. Dad hears about it and doesn't give a crap because I am an adult. I am 19 and decide to go to the movies at 10 p.m. Chaos. At 19/20 she knew my iTunes password for some reason and obsessively used Find My iPhone to track my location. My older brother witnessed her just constantly tracking my location for no apparent reason. One time I was in my boyfriend's basement and I get 10 missed calls from her because it said I was in the middle of a field. When I figured out how to turn it off, she would not shut up about it for months and would try to guilt me into turning it back on. Said it was because she cared. Sorry for caring. Dad lets me track his phone. When I first getting to know my boyfriend when I was 20, I got really drunk one night and fell asleep until 2 p.m. I wake up to 20 missed calls and ignore them because I was going home anyway. I start driving home and pass my mom's car on the way back to my house. Turns out she called the freaking police and was driving to his house to find me. I never gave her his address. Got it from tracking my phone. Another reason I disabled Find My iPhone. I wasn't allowed to have my car at college for my entire junior year because they didn't trust me with it. I've driven since 2014 and have never had any incidents for them to not trust me. I wasn't able to get a job, go grocery shopping, or really have a life because of it. When I had my first boyfriend when I was 15, we were hanging out in my basement to play video games, and my mom was sitting in a corner the entire time watching us. Said I was driving to Atlantic City an hour and a half away for an anime convention when I was 20. Tried insisting on driving me and my friends and listed crime statistics to me and basically said I would get mugged. She didn't let my brother learn how to ride a bike until he was 13 because she was afraid of him injuring himself. Boy, that's just what I can think of from the top of my head. Luckily I won't get cut off for ignoring her crazy and doing what I want. My college advisor and I sat in a conference room with them on speakerphone and my CA basically acted as a mediator. They handed over the password when I agreed to let them read my apps before I sent them in. I then changed the password and they tried to get it out of my advisor even though I complied with the arrangement. Total BS. I also filled out 26 apps because it was easier to just do it rather than have them say, well, obviously you don't care about your future, and then argue. I then filled out so many apps that the common app wouldn't allow me to fill out anymore. When I told my parents this, they said something like, "Do you think we can call the common app and ask them to make an exception?" That was my breaking point. I was done and told them absolutely not. We didn't talk for 1.5 months after. Totally worth it. They are good PPL, but that was insane. I know a girl that even at like 18 she wasn't allowed to leave her driveway on a bike and couldn't cross the road to get the paper. I am pretty sure they loosen up though. We lived out in the country where you could go hours without seeing a car go by. Was sitting in my living room earlier today having a discussion about a celebrity's height. Told him to Google it, to which he proceeded to ask my mom if it was okay. I was like, WTF. Google it, but I need permission first. So yeah, that's kinda overbearing. Joke's on you, he actually went to Disney.com now that he finally got a parent's permission. Helicopter parenting is sadly the norm nowadays. I had friends in high school back in the mid-2000s who weren't allowed to leave the house past where their parents could see them from the windows. In high school, when they were 16-18. There was a news story recently that teenagers are getting the same amount of physical activity as people in their 60s, and I immediately thought of this kind of crap. Kids are not getting any exercise because their parents won't let them play outside. I guess it wasn't overbearing because I was only 6, but I remember having to shout at my friend's house across the street for him to come outside and play because I wasn't allowed to cross a never busy residential street to knock. The parent who recruited friends for their kid. I was at college orientation and one parent came up to my friend and said, "That girl over there is my daughter. You go up to her and introduce yourself to her and be her friend." I don't like people with crazy parents. My aunt cutting up her son's dinner for him when he was 12. Also telling everyone that her ex-husband was an unfit father and shouldn't have custody because he didn't check his 12 and 15-year-old son's school bags every morning. He just left it up to them to pack the right books, which occasionally led to one of them forgetting something and getting detention. She thought this was unforgivably neglectful. We thought it was freaking normal. A rich girl at my college used to semi-regularly borrow my old butt truck. We were friends and my vehicle was worth maybe $1,000, so I didn't care. We were in agriculture type programs and I'd honestly just assumed she used it when she didn't want to trash her 40k pickup hauling nastiness. It always came back with a full tank, so whatever. I eventually learned that her truck had a GPS tracker on it and her parents watched it like a hawk. She would get screamed at and threatened with being financially cut off if the vehicle went somewhere they didn't approve of, or just stayed too long somewhere, like Walmart, or was out too late. So, got a midnight craving for Waffle House while studying? Let's drive the old pose. Afternoon at the lake? Go to borrow a car or ride with someone. Note, this was back when personal GPS was brand new and phones were still dumb. I can only imagine what her folks would have done if she'd had a smartphone. And I thought not being able to go outside of the neighborhood without a friend, parent, relative, etc. until I was 12 was overprotective. It depends on what they mean by neighborhood. Giving a kid a boundary a few blocks away doesn't sound unreasonable. A kid in my school wasn't allowed to join our band because my causal farmer parents didn't force me to go to church and therefore my family was labeled sinners. I became an electrician and started a family and he knocked up his girlfriend after high school and was stealing gasoline in a refueling truck and selling it to the Hutterites. That kid had so much pressure on him to go to a nice Bible college after school, but I think he just eventually strayed away from his parents to avoid them making all his decisions for him. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to have a PlayStation 2 because he needed to focus on his schoolwork. We were 7 years old. My friend's aunt. Her 2 kids are on the autistic spectrum, and they are on the high functioning end at that. Given the appropriate help in fostering independence and the like, they would have integrated easily into society, but this woman proves there is such a thing as too much help. Why I said kids is because they are 36 and 34 respectively, and yet they are unable to do the most simple tasks without having her get in the mix. Witnessing this firsthand when I went to their house because my friend wanted company while over there one time. Her aunt had to cut the crusts off their sandwiches because they apparently were incapable of it from the years upon years of her doing every dang thing for them and not letting them grow as human beings simply because of their diagnosis of both being autistic, despite the fact they were born able to overcome and be successful with the right help. Her heart has always been in the right place and she's a sweet woman, but she suffers from the times she's used to and the lack of information to have proved her wrong about their condition when it was truly critical, and even now, she knows little about the disorders. I do hope that, God forbid, when she dies someday, those 2 will be able to still live somehow without their mother : my sister trying to have a conversation with my 12-year-old nephew, her son, while he is on the toilet doing number 2. B. Can't you shut the heck up for 5 minutes and let that boy take a crap in peace? So inconsiderate. Reading this thread has made me realize that there is a large portion of the parent population who don't realize that abuse is not always physical. A friend of mine in high school used to invite me over to her house so that she could eat sugar. Her parents decided that she was too fat, a great thing to tell a 15-year-old girl BTW, and eliminated all sugar in the house, as well as bread and a few other things. They would constantly talk about her in a negative way in front of everyone, including her friends. She weighed too much, her grades weren't good enough, she wasn't pretty enough. But other than that, I think they wanted everyone to think that they were normal, good parents, and so gave her a lot of freedom in front of other people. If I was over, then she was allowed to walk down to a nearby cafe with me so that I could eat the forbidden foods, but they'd pull her aside before she left and tell her that she needed to make good choices while out of the house. We'd go down to the cafe, she'd buy a mug of tea, and then she would shove as many French vanilla coffee creamers into my bag as she could fit. I'd buy a pastry of some kind and tip very generously. The people at the cafe knew her and her parents, so I think they took pity on her and let her take them. We'd go back to her house and go up to her room under the guise of doing homework, and we'd hide her contraband sugar. She was also given a 9 PM bedtime until our senior year of high school. She was forced into singing lessons even when she didn't want to, and her mother made her learn piano. She was allowed 1 hour of TV a day and could only listen to it at the lowest volume possible because it would damage her hearing otherwise. She could only use her computer in the living room or dining room where her parents could see what she was doing and read over her shoulder, and she could only have half an hour of non-homework computer That was a house rule, actually, and one I didn't adhere to because I've never used fruit wash in my life, and her parents were just horrified. Her dad would snatch fruit and veg out of my hands before I could eat them and properly wash them for me if I hadn't used the dang fruit wash. I swear her mother almost fainted when I ate a grape out of the package one time without washing it at all. Even beyond that, they were just weird people. Their house didn't feel right. It was very personalized in that they had personal things, pictures they'd taken, paintings and artwork, a metric fuck ton of books, but everything was styled. It felt like I was on a movie set almost, and that these were set dressings. Everything was just so perfect and nothing was out of place, though it wasn't exactly neat and tidy. It was so freaking bizarre. TLDR. No sugar, fruit wash, and I'm not convinced they weren't aliens. Report cards at my school went out today. A parent of one of our students freaked out cause her daughter will never become a doctor with marks like these. Her daughter will be starting kindergarten next year. When I was in high school, my curfew was 9 p.m. regardless of what day it was. Every Wednesday I would go to church with friends. I always told my mother the same thing. Church ends at 9. We'll stop by Burger King after for dinner and I'll be home no later than 10. And every time I'd get home just before 10 and have to bang on the door until my dad woke up and let me in. I had to sleep on the porch a few times because no one would let me in. The strangest part was that my mother was a super fanatical Christian, so you'd think she would have been all for me going to church every Wednesday night, but apparently she thought I was off doing drugs or having sex or some other balls. Mine are pretty bad. They take away the phone I bought. Don T let me use my tablet. Passwords on every device but my phone. Block things on my Xbox account. I have to ask them to log the computer on to do even homework. And I get yelled at if I so much as connect to a store's Wi-Fi network. It may have all started due to some pee on my first smartphone, but like, what teenage boy doesn't do that alone in their own room? A mate of mine's mum was particularly overbearing a few years ago when we went on holiday vacation. We were 19 at the time and were in Ibiza for 10 days. Turns out this guy's mum was taking his wages off him and drip feeding him a limited amount whenever he would want to buy something or go for a drink. So we all had our money split between cash and a debit card type thing we got from the travel company to keep the rest of our euros on. After a few days my mate has spent all his cash and has to go to an ATM to lift some money. No money on his card. He spent the next 2 hours on the phone home to ask his mum to transfer more money onto his card. She eventually agrees but then doesn't transfer the money for 2 days. He had to borrow money from the rest of us so we could all go out and party the next 2 nights. It was pretty crappy for my mate to have to go through all that with his mates sitting there waiting on him. And I think she's still like that with him now, even though we're a good few years older. Dude, holy crap, my friend had the same problem. His mom and stepdad would collect the money that he earned at his job in an envelope in their bedroom because one time he spent like $5 on something without asking them. These people are batshit crazy. Dad had a friend and his wife and daughter come over and go on our boat. Daughter was around my age. I think I was 13. I also have a friend over who is 14. We are kids. After boat ride they hang out on the boat but I convince girl to come with me and my friend cause we are getting in the pool. She hesitantly jumps in and we are having fun. Her dad comes up and talks to her a bit and she gets out and basically stays at his side for another 30 minutes and they leave. Parents told me later that she was in serious trouble for swimming unsupervised with 2 boys. I was freaking 13. Wish I could have checked up on her later in life or whatever. She was nice. There are lots of examples of parents being overbearing on their own children. Here's another take on it. Take all the stories you are reading here. A mom that won't let their kid watch Harry Potter because witchcraft. Or a mom that won't let their kid stay outdoors too long, or won't let their teen leave their yard. A dad who pushes the kid to sports, more sports, and nothing but sports, that will hurl insults at them for not winning. Now imagine that overbearing parent not only doing that to their own children, but to every other child in the neighborhood. Yeah, that's what I grew up with. My mom was the woman who would call the police if there were kids outside after 6 p.m. on a summertime Friday, or if they were outside unsupervised. This was back in the 1980s. Everyone was outside unsupervised back then. She campaigned to have books removed from the school curriculum and school libraries, and usually one that would call the police if she found any bookstores still selling the book. She ended the option of having kids walk to school, forcing the school department to have buses and bus stops for kids who lived, literally, right next door to the school. My dad would berate my friends for spending time outside playing if we weren't playing real sports. Soccer wasn't real, and would insult anyone who was losing a game. He became a member of the school board just so he could bring about an end to non-athletic extracurricular activities at the high school and to refocus the school towards athletic programs. My best friend's mom wouldn't let her answer the phone so she could screen the calls. On several occasions she pretended to be my friend on the phone and probed me for info on what bad things her daughter was doing. She was often not allowed to come out and play for no reason whatsoever. Years later she confessed to her boyfriend that her mom took all of her inheritance from her grandparents and made her take out student loans so her mom could get that money. She never finished her college and was racked with debt and not able to move out on her own, even if that was allowed. Finally, at 25, her longtime boyfriend took her in, and they are no contact with her family now. I used to run a horse riding school. One mother asked if I had sons. I don't, and demanded that I ensure no boys were scheduled for lessons or to be on property at all. She'd graciously allowed the toddler younger siblings of some riders. During the time her daughter came for horse riding lessons, she went on to say she wanted to book her daughter in for our school holiday 3-day horse riding camp, but she'd bring her each morning and take her home each evening instead of letting her sleep over with the other kids. She demanded to be told should any boy be booked into the camp so she could withdraw her daughter from it. I felt so sorry for that girl but refused to not allow boys to book, and during those time slots, so she pulled her daughter out of lessons with me altogether not long afterward, for which I was grateful. That's how you raise someone who is afraid of boys and will never talk to them. I have a ton of stories if anyone is interested, but my mom tried giving me a 10 o'clock curfew when I was moving my stuff into my new apartment the night before my wedding. Also, she called a friend's mom and asked her if her son would take me to prom. I didn't ask her to. She knew I had a crush on him. I couldn't look at him for weeks, I was so embarrassed. Oh yes, my years of living in a small evangelical town will finally pay off. Back when my parents were crazy and overbearing, my siblings and I weren't allowed to watch SpongeBob or other Disney shows because they were sin. I think I watched basic kids shows with my baby siblings until about 10 or 11. My MP3 player would be checked to see if I was on the Christian station. I just switched to it before they looked. My sister and I got banned from playing Club Penguin by my parents because it was a social platform. I've been called a S by my mom whenever I wear things that look too short. I have really long legs so most things look short. My parents insisted on having all my passwords. My sister was smart and just made 2 accounts for everything. One time my sister sent her friend a meme late at night and my mom was convinced she was sending nudes. Same sister also was previously accused of this in like 7th grade for some reason. Boys aren't allowed upstairs, except for my sister and her boyfriend. Lucky me, I'm a lesbian. I had friends who couldn't go to dances because it was seen as too intimate to possibly dance with someone and a sin. When my parents became significantly less Christian, the few somewhat friends I had weren't allowed to hang out with me. A girl literally gave me a note from her mom saying that my family strayed from God's path or something. This was like 4th grade. I got told by my friend's parents that playing mermaids with my friend was sinful. We got in trouble. Same parents also tried to educate me about how the dinosaurs were fake and put there by the devil to trick people. Luckily I was a smart kid who liked science. Friends with a girl who I think was Mormon. She was super nice. Always had to wear longer skirts with leggings though. You would know if her dad was out of town because she would wear shorts or something. I laughed at the sending a meme part. If my mom ever saw my friends' cars in my neighborhood, she would chase them down with her car to make sure I wasn't in their car. She sent my sister and I both to therapists. when my sister was 7 and when I was 16, and wrote long letters before every session about what we'd done wrong between appointments. Both times, the therapists told my mom that she seemed to have control issues and that we weren't troubled or problem children like she claimed. She used to constantly make comments about our weight, even when I was a size 00. She actually kept all of the desserts in our house in a locked toolbox in the freezer so we couldn't eat anything sweet. When my sister and I eventually figured out the combo, we were left home alone a lot. My mom got a bike lock and wrapped it between the freezer and fridge door handles to try to keep us out. It didn't really occur to her that we could just open both. LOL. I'm 25 and she still won't take herself off of my bank account. She monitors it regularly and makes snide comments if I spend any money on alcohol or at bars. She took away my phone so much that during the summer after my freshman year of college, I wrote a long list of all of my friends' phone numbers and hid it in my drawer. My junior year of college, I went out on New Year's and didn't text or call her the next day because my phone had been stolen the night before. Around noon, one of my friends came up to me and said my mom, who she'd never spoken to or heard about in her life, was on the phone for me. She has repeatedly told me that my past present boyfriend's families weren't going to be impressed with me because of insert relevant character flaws, that I'm going to get fired from my first real job, that she wouldn't want to be friends with me if she were my age, and that she can tell I'm going to become an alcoholic drug addict one day. I've never gotten in trouble with alcohol and hardly even drink anymore, and I don't even do drugs. You can open a new bank account. Reading all these posts, I'm glad my parents were as lazy as they were. The only rules were don't get arrested, don't break any bones, be home for dinner if you want to eat. My aunt and uncle, they sent their crotch goblin to the school my mum works at, probs in the hope of getting some preferential treatment. Kid is an utter pain in the ass, getting into fights and doing poorly in all his classes except sports because he has a natural flair for it. My aunt and uncle are told repeatedly that they needed to impress on this kid that academics were important, but they just told the school they weren't treating him right and giving him enough chance to prove himself. They had him tested for every learning disability out there. Nothing. Kid's just thick as crap. But they won't accept it and try and blame it on my mum and try to get her fired by accusing her of meddling with the kid's scores because they had this delusion that she was jealous of their success. Suckers. Anyway, they pulled him out and now pay about £30,000 a year on a school suited to his talents. Basically he gets a trophy every week and gives his parents the sense of superiority they crave. The kid will either grow up to be an athlete or will take over his parents' company. Freaking hate the lot of them. Here's to hoping he's a successful athlete, because I'd feel sorry for the employees when he runs that company into the ground. I was watching one of those daytime court shows and there was a case of a man, 20 years old, suing his stepmom. I forget what the case was, but the judge asked for some backstory. The stepmom said when she came into the picture, the stepson was on medication for ADHD. She said she didn't believe in medication for that and took him off the pills. The stepmom then went in to explain she used hoopin for medicine and when he acted up in school and got bad grades, because, you know, ADHD does that, she would go to school with him and sit in his classes to make sure he was paying attention. And TLDR, stepmom took stepson off ADHD medication, whooped and embarrassed him for acting out. I know a young woman who stood by the candy shelf in a grocery store obviously choosing something to buy. Another woman and her daughter came up to her and said, "Would you please step away from that shelf? My daughter is not allowed to see an adult woman buying unhealthy treats for herself. You must understand I don't want her to find out about candy, as she is only allowed to eat fruit. So weird. If your child, who probably soon gonna find out and get diabetes from all those restrictions, is not allowed to look at adults buying sweets, then why are you bringing her to a grocery store? Oh gosh." This was a while ago. Back when my siblings and I were in elementary school we had this thing called quiet time. What was quiet time? Well, it only happened in the summer. We all were locked in our rooms for 1 hour and weren't allowed to do anything. Every day. My mom's logic was that she needed at least 1 hour a day to herself, which is understandable. But this was more of a punishment to us than a time to herself. We weren't allowed to leave our rooms, talk, Use anything with a screen, even if it was muted. Make noise. If we were outside playing at the time, she would call us in. So it was time out. If she really wanted time to herself, then, for God's sake, let us play outside or at least put the Game Boy on mute. God, that's torture. One of my friends couldn't drink water by himself, without a parent in the room, until he was 8. Totally normal guy. He is a partier now, but B has had no special needs or anything like that. My 18-year-old friend is only allowed to get her hair cut once a year, and when she does it only gets cut a couple inches. Nothing drastic. But she's also not allowed to dye her hair. Her mom's reason? She ruined her hair when she was younger and her hair doesn't grow past shoulder length well and she misses long hair, so she's living through her daughter. Also, she's been dating the same guy for almost 2 years. When they're at her house, they are not allowed to be in any room of the house alone. I don't even think he's allowed in her room at all. I know of a guy who's a manager for a small chain. A girl comes in, she's a college student, and has bright pink hair. Everything checked out, and the manager offered her the job as long as she changed the hair. She left. Manager gets a call from mom screaming at him about discrimination and that she'll call the police if he doesn't hire her. This is a grown woman. I was teaching. I'm professor, and first week of classes a young man's mom asked to speak with me during office hours. Said her son really needed to register for my class even though it was closed. I really didn't mind. One student over the limit doesn't bother me. Anyway, the student never showed up to class, slept through when he did, and eventually he failed with a big fat F. I wonder how having meddling, overbearing helicopter parents affected his motivation and academic skills and preparation. A friend of mine, his mother got a job at his school so she could be his teacher and be in the know about all his assessment, then go home and do it for him. He has gone on to do engineering degree at university and now his mother has almost completed his degree. I'm so proud of her. I mean him. Oh, and there was the 2 free cars she bought him. That guy played to the divorce like a master. My sister went on a school skiing trip during the second to last year of high school. One of the girls who she was sharing a room with would always disappear into their room when it was free time. My sister finds out that this girl spends every free hour she has studying with her parents on the phone, not saying anything, just making sure she was actually studying. Bearing in mind this was in France and the girl's parents were in UK. Tried to get my friends at church to play RuneScape, which was going well until a mother sent an email to everyone saying it was evil and had witchcraft. Then I was back to playing alone. See? Mums of Reddit, what do you know about your child that you will never tell to him, huh? Have a daughter in college. Her first summer back home I went to wash all of her clothes she brought back. As a college girl, it was at least 4 loads. As I sorted her clothes before washing them out tumbled 4 butt plugs wrapped in a bag. They were huge, like, huge, so I carefully wrapped them back up and slid them back into her things. TLDR, daughter likes sticking huge things in her butt. I am a parental figure to my orphaned younger siblings, and there's something I'll never tell my sister. When she was going through a terrible period as a Greek addict, late teens, she stole our mom's wallet and all of our mom's credit cards. Bank accounts had to be cancelled and changed. Our mom was in bad health but had a huge life insurance policy she had gotten almost 15 years prior, when she was healthier. When the accounts were cancelled, she forgot to change the auto payments for the insurance. It was declined and subsequently cancelled. She couldn't get another policy anymore. She had too many health problems. My mom told me about all this in confidence. Less than 2 years later our mom died. Everyone thought she had a life insurance policy to help us, but she didn't. She left absolutely nothing. I'm the only one who knows why. It would kill my sister to know her addiction cost us several $100,000. The recovery from our mom's death was really hard. Siblings moved in with me, etc. And the insurance money could have saved us a long period of financial and emotional struggle. Knowing something like that could push your sister back into a bad place, but it couldn't have always been easy to keep that secret. Your mother would be so proud of you. That when he was 3, he created a suit of body armor out of maxi pads, and I have photographic evidence. Authentic period armor. I've answered this before, but my teenage daughter writes smutty fan fiction on Tumblr and has thousands of followers. She doesn't know that I know, and it's pretty dang good, too. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this elsewhere. Still relevant. I was turning my daughter's mattress when I came across a notebook full of female nudes. She must have been putting it together for some time, not wanting to embarrass her or violate her trust. I finished flipping the mattress and put the notebook back just as I'd found it. That was years ago and she still has no idea. Good, these are making me think all the embarrassing stuff my mum must have found all these years. Those pictures I had below my mattress and below my books on my bookshelf. I never know what happened to those once I left home. When my daughter was 3, she bonked my mom in the head with a toy, as 3-year-olds are prone to do. My mom had a blood clotting disease and got a blood clot in her head about a week later and eventually died from it. I'm not sure anyone but me has put 2 and 2 together, and I aim to keep it that way. My daughter had no idea what she was doing. Because she was 3, she would probably literally kill herself if she found this out, since she is a hair bipolar and gets to a really dark place with too much bad news. My mom never seemed to put 2 and 2 together. She had the disease for 13 years and most people only live 6, so she felt very blessed. My wife would be devastated to know this, even though she knows I don't think she connected them. She probably doesn't remember my daughter bonking my mom on the head anymore. So, I'll never tell them, and that's okay. TLDR. My 3-year-old accidentally killed grandma because she didn't understand that you can't hit people with toys or that my mom had a blood clotting disease. Thanks for letting me get this out. I've never told anybody this before. That she ate cat poop. We had a very long-haired cat at the time. RIP little buddy. Apparently some poop got stuck to his fur only to fall out upstairs where the baby was crawling around and found it. 5 years later she is still a normal, happy and healthy child. Sorry sweetheart. Your kid now has toxoplasmosis and will eventually become a cat slave. Good going, little buddy. I kid, though. Even if she did have it, it's not proven to be terribly harmful and she wouldn't be alone by far. I saw my flip cam was missing from the table I put it on and went to look for it in my 11-year-old son's room. I checked to see if there was anything recorded and there was. He was masturbating to a magazine of mine advertising women's clothing and underwear, and commenting about which girl he would like to put his dong in. I put the camera back, and when he came home I asked him to bring it downstairs if he had it. That gave him time to delete the videos, and he has no idea I am now hiding my flip cam and ladies clothing magazines. He will never know I saw his tiny boner being manipulated to images of plus-sized women. You might want to tell him to never ever put things on the internet. That the only reason I taught my kids how to play poker was so that I could learn their tells and know when they're lying to me. Probably not the answer you are looking for. My son is 4 and he doesn't think I know about the vegetables he puts in his pockets when I'm not looking. Oh, I know, alright. Laundry is fun. My 3-year-old is a very affectionate little guy, but he's very embarrassed about his being affectionate. He thinks I don't know he comes into my room every morning for snuggles and then sneaks out when I wake up. I caught my son once pretending to milk himself into a bucket while taking a bath. He was only around 4 years old, so I don't think he remembers, but he was hovering over a bucket and squeezing his penis. I asked him what he was doing and he told me he was pretending his penis was an udder and he was trying to get milk. I said okay honey and slowly closed the door. The end. I did that to a dog when I was like 5. My mom laughed and told my grandma, who laughed harder. I really hope they forgot that. I know what their faces look like when they're trying to take a dump. In the same moment, I also realized my mother knows the same thing about me. I went for a walk once with my daughter when she was about a year old. It was along a cement paved path that went through this little scenic park area. Lots of suburban nature and crap. I had brought the stroller along but she was getting a bit antsy, so I took her out and sat her on the handle, facing me, and I held onto her waist and basically used her bum and my forearms to push the stroller. As we walked, this section of the pavement in front of us just ended up being just covered in crickets. I don't know why there were so many. I had never known this trail to have crazy amounts of crickets midday. Well, I anxiously start pushing through them with the stroller, hoping if I move slowly, they'll have time to hop out of the way. They mostly hopped away, but one hopped right up onto my daughter's face. I panicked, and in a split-second reaction, I straight up smacked her. The cricket hopped off her face again before I got to it, but she looked at me so stunned and started crying. And then I cried because I felt horrible, but I couldn't stop laughing because of how stupid the whole thing was. Got lots of weird looks as I cried, laughed the rest of the short walk home. She will never know. Tell her, that's hilarious. She was conceived because I really wanted an iced cappuccino from Tim Hortons. He didn't feel like driving, so I made him a deal. It actually ended pretty nicely in a field under a clear night sky with many stars out. Traded physical intimacy for coffee. Heck, I live in Seattle and that crap doesn't even happen here. Stay at home dad. Here, I'm hoping that I never have the need to tell my kids that 2 out of the 3 served jail time in utero. Dude, antepartum street cred. I'll never tell my dear son that I follow every freaking single comment he makes on Reddit and that I'm the one who gives him the golds. Poor kid will always think that he's a such funny person. Not my kid, but at a family party my cousin, who was 3 or 4 at the time, needed a pee. The party was a buffet, and when his dad took him to the toilet he discovered that the kid had been secretly threading hula hoop crisps onto his dong. Not sure how well this translates for non-UK people. I will never, ever tell my daughter that when she was 1 week old I accidentally threw her across the room onto a wood floor. It was about 2 AM. I was breastfeeding her in the living room and a huge spider crawled on my arm. The whole new baby late at night thing made me stupid. So my reaction was to use the arm I was holding the baby in to get the spider off my other arm. My little girl went flying. It was horrible. She was fine, though, completely unharmed, just kind of pee off. No one tell her. You can't just offer your baby to a spider to make it go away. My son's grandparents have custody of him in Australia. His mother and I were a one-time fling on a beach in North Carolina along with another girl at the same time. She went to prison for trafficking large quantities of drugs in Australia, which is a major offense over there. I think she's serving 25 to life or something. One day I was called by the Australian version of Child Services telling me that I need to come pick up my son. I didn't even know that I had a son until then. He was 7 at the time. Apparently what had happened was she put my name down on his birth certificate and kept my contact info on a bookmark that hung from her rearview mirror. His grandparents came and got him. They tell him that his daddy is off fighting in the war and I've only spoken with him twice. I have sent over my part of a paternity test a few times to see if he is actually mine or not, but his grandparents keep ignoring them. I think they're afraid that I will just show up one day and take him away. He doesn't really know me and it would be awkward for me to take custody of a 12-year-old that I don't even know if he is mine or not. I think he's gonna be pee when he finds out the truth. So I took a leather-bound journal and wrote out all the things about me that I think he should know, along with the real story about why I wasn't around. I've included several stories about me and my time in the army, my travels, and a lot of good advice covering many situations that he may find himself in, complete with glossary and index. I wrapped up this journal along with my own dog-eared copy of the Ranger Handbook with my own notes written in, an old set of my dog tags, and a way to contact me. I sent it to a lawyer's office in Australia with instructions to deliver it to him on his 18th birthday. I'm looking forward to the Reddit post about his delivery when the time comes. Holy crap, I was expecting this to get buried. Thanks for all the replies, reminders, gold, and support. This post really is the TLDR. I've made multiple attempts to the grandparents, but I'm always ignored. I've only gotten through when I've called on his birthday, and that was just twice. I know who my father is, but I kinda wish I could have found out by a mystery lawyer turning up with a weathered, dusty package full of stamps, asking me to sit down. Hoa. From a son's pov, but my mom, and the rest of my family, have hidden from me that my older brother is only my half-brother, same mom, my entire life so far, and they think I don't know, but I overheard my grandmother talking about it at a family reunion years ago. Same here, there's so much evidence that I can't not know, but they still won't tell me. If we had not lost the baby before him, he could not have been conceived. This applies to both children. That I know he is suicidal. I fear if I let him know that he'll go through with it or be too ashamed to speak with me again. Not a mom, but my cousin doesn't know that he is a product of rape. My entire extended family knows, and as far as I know, nearly all of his cousins know aside from his own brother and sister. He was always treated special because of it, like if babying him will somehow make everything okay. He's turned out to be an entitled dickface because of it. This story was a roller coaster. Oh no, that's terrible, well at least his family made sure to love him. Oh no, he became an butthole. Years ago we had an awesome cat named Chosen One. We all loved this cat, but especially my oldest son who, at the time, was just beginning to drive. He was about 17 or so. One day my son was leaving the house to go somewhere, and when he left he reached down and gave Chosen a little love and out the door he went. Unbeknownst to him, the cat had followed him out the door, and for some reason the cat must have ran under the car. Nobody actually witnessed this event, so we're speculating on what exactly happened. So my son drives off, and a little while later I go outside, only find Chosen laying on the driveway curled up in a ball dead. We think the kitty ran under the car or was in front of the tire or something, and when my son drove away he ran over Chosen and killed him. We were all pretty upset of course, and when my son came home we told him Chosen had been hit by a car in the road and died. We've never told him, and never will, that we're pretty sure he was the one that killed the cat. He'd blame himself and forever feel guilty about killing his favorite cat. My son wasn't planned, and I never ever wanted or planned to have kids. I fell pregnant accidentally. He will never ever be told this because my mum repeatedly told me I was an accident as a child, and it really fricked with me. I like to call my first son a wonderful surprise. He really was too. I walked in on my 5-year-old stepson with his pants down, rubbing the cat against his dong and saying, "Oh, that feels good." I said, "That's not what the cat is for." He was embarrassed. The cat hasn't been the same since. I'm imagining a cat with 1,000-yard stare. That cat has seen some crap. My daughter is not biologically my husband's. She was conceived with donor sperm. Hubby is sterile. I want to tell her because I think it's fair just for medical reasons alone. Especially now considering she was born with a major heart defect. Hubby doesn't want to tell her. Might not ever. I don't think it would matter, but I would be devastated if it made her think less of my husband. She's only been with us a month, but he loves her so much. It would crush him. Anyway, yeah, that's our secret for her. She should probably know cause of medical history stuff. I didn't know something about my family and was misdiagnosed twice. He has a third nipple. It's small, but it's a nipple. That seems like something you should probably talk to him about. Sadly, I'm pretty sure my mother has nothing to post here. She was awfully open about everything. From my stepdad's dong size to the inside joke about duck penises her and my biological father had, or how she likes it rough, or what toys are good for what, or how much she really wishes I were gay, or how I was conceived because spermicidal gel isn't very effective, or how itchy her crotch is at any given time. Seriously, I wish my mom had at least one thing to post to this thread, but if she does, it could only be so terrifying it would break my psyche. She tells you all this stuff because she doesn't think it's that bad compared to the really deep, dark secrets she has. I have a favorite. I knew they do have favorites. He was conceived after we got lost trying to find a Halloween party at a friend's new place. We ended up just going home. But as I was already in the French maid costume, it made perfect sense to get drunk and forget the birth control. I don't imagine we will ever tell him he was conceived inside a French maid costume. Actually, who am I kidding? We will totally bust this story out for his future spouse. That there's a chance he was conceived while me and his dad were both tripping on acid. Have tripped a lot. Physical intimacy never entered into my mind. Dad here. I know what he's doing with the butter, and that's why I buy the store brand for him to make toast at night and leave my good butter alone. And there's a reason I bought our own rechargeable batteries. Because it's nice to have any remote actually work when you try to use it. There's not a calculator in the world that goes through batteries like that. Not exactly a mom. I'm actually a son of a mother. But my mom has never told me that she had a baby before me. That baby had a female version of my name and died at I think 2 weeks old. She said she named me what she did because of some Norwegian thing, but I know it's after my sister. My grandma accidentally let it slip when I was like 17. I do wish my mom would tell me though. That I found a treasure hunt he had created as a surprise for his girlfriend on their anniversary. One of the clues was that she should go to the place where he first flicked her in the butt. I should add, they were both adults when they first met, so whatever they do in their private lives is their business only. But I could never unsee that note. When I was a child, my dad drove me and my brothers into the wilderness and then left us there, leaving us to find our own way home. Did your parents employ any similarly questionable parenting techniques, thinking it would teach you a life lesson? I was having trouble with a bully when I was in JH. I talked to my father about it, an Irishman. He said just fight back, to which I replied he's always surrounded by his friends. My father went on to inform me I'm sure he doesn't pee with his friends. Just follow him into the bathroom and while he is pee just bash his head in with a 2x4 or something and then don't stop hitting him until he can't remember how to speak. Good advice from dear old dad. Remind me not to pee off your dad. My dad used to intentionally trip me to teach me balance. He would hang on to my hand and trip me. He would always make sure my face didn't hit the ground. I did eventually learn some balance though. Mine just sent me to ballet class, accomplished the same purpose, and was less painful until point was involved. Also, pink leotards. I'm going to preface this with, my dad is freaking awesome. It was 1989 and I desperately wanted to learn to ride my bike without training wheels. My father worked 3 jobs and we rarely spent time together. My mother was and still is useless when it comes to teaching anything. Her advice, so, do it. You'll fall enough and either get sick of it or figure out how not to fall. So I took her advice and tried. I fell so much my elbows, shins and knees were a bloody mess of road rash. My dad came home and saw my battle injuries and had me tell him what happened. I tearfully told him I was never going to learn it and how I wished he could teach me instead of going to work. Next morning, dad woke me up bright and early. My dad was always at work long before I woke up, so seeing him standing over my bed felt like a dream. He made me my favorite breakfast, French toast and bacon, and said we were going to figure out how to get me to ride that bike. We drove to the high school parking lot and he pulled my bike out of the back of the station wagon. He sat me on it and taught me how to balance myself. Once I mastered sitting correctly, he took the training wheels off and he held onto me as I wobbled and struggled to keep myself upright. After a half hour of trying, he got an idea. He attached a bungee cord to the back of the car and to my bike. I loved tow trucks as a kid and he said, we were going to play tow truck. I sat on the bike and he slowly drove the car, towing me behind him. That's how I learned to ride a bike. My father tied a bungee cord to my bike and his car and pulled me around a parking lot. Didn't fall once. Years later he and I were talking about it and he said, that was so dang dangerous. You could have been killed or injured. But you didn't fall once and it was a load of fun, wasn't it? Even without the preface, I would agree your dad is awesome. When I was about 6, my father just picked me up and tossed me into the deep end of the diving pool and told me to tread water for over 20 minutes. I've never had problems swimming, so I suppose this was his way of preparing me for when other people throw me into open water unannounced with no life jacket. I was at a birthday party when I was 6 or 7. I think her dad got sick of having a dozen little girls screaming in his house, so he packed us into the back of his pickup and drove a ways off and told us to find our way back to the birthday girl's house. This was in the ghetto. I didn't think it was so bad at the time, but I'm sure my parents would have been pissed if they knew. My dad once made me sit down for like a solid half hour and try to squeeze various fruits with my hands until they burst. Then he informed me that I could now take out any rapist. And all went fairly smoothly until he whipped out the pineapple. Here's one from my grandfather. When he was about 7 years old, growing up in rural Canada, his father asked him to come out into the woods with him to get some firewood. Off they went, my great grandfather with his axe, and my young grandfather in tow. At some point they reach a clearing where the wood would be chopped. There was a large, flat stump for said chopping. It was there that my great grandfather informed his son that the family could no longer afford him, and if he could just kneel down and lay his head on the chopping stump to be lopped off, In tears, my grandfather complied. His father raised the axe high and promptly burst into laughter as he continued to chop his head off. When I was around 1 or 2, I apparently had a habit of biting my older sister whenever she came near me to play, to teach me how it felt. The next time I did it, my mother grabbed my arm and bit me the same way I had my sister. I cried for 10 minutes then never did it again. TLDR, my mom used pack leader dominance to teach me a lesson. This is actually a common way to solve biting problems with kids. Sometimes you just have to teach them what it feels like. Another story, but this is my husband's family. My father-in-law is a veterinarian. His kids usually ended up at the vet hospital getting stitched up or mended after accidents. My sister-in-law was a classic middle child who wanted attention constantly. She desperately wanted a leg cast so she could hobble around on crutches, get kids to sign her cast and bask in the sympathy. In order to realize her dream, she repeatedly flung herself downstairs. One day after another dramatic fling, she was hobbling and crying. My father-in-law took her to the vet hospital for an x-ray. He proclaimed her ankle broken and set about fixing it up. He used black fiberglass wrapping on the cast to make sure kids couldn't sign it. He put a hard heel on the bottom of it, making it a walking cast so she didn't need crutches. He told her she had to stay in the cast for 8 weeks, ensuring she would be in her cast throughout the winter months when she ordinarily would go ice skating on the pond near their house. She didn't find out until Thanksgiving of 2002, over 20 years later, that she had never broken her ankle at all. He set her up in a cast just to teach her a lesson. I had the good fortune of being at the table, having married her brother a year earlier. When she learned of her father's deceit, she admitted that she never again tried to fling herself down the stairs after that cast came off. That's not questionable. That's hilariously evil. One time when we were in grade school, my mom left my sister and I at a shopping center about 4 miles from our house. On the ride home from school, my sister would not stop changing the radio station, and I guess it was pee my mom off, but she didn't say anything. She stopped at a grocery store and asked us to run in and grab something while she waited in the car. We got out, got what she wanted, and when we returned to where the car should have been, she was gone. We looked around the parking lot for about half an hour, and then when it started getting dark we began walking home. When we got home she said something along the lines of, "Well, that will teach you not to mess with my radio or something. WTF mom." Whoa, straight to DEFCON1. Around age 11 I was once on a camping trip with my pops and a few family friends. When it was time to pack up in the morning, I was too busy lazy playing around in the forest to pack any of my stuff up into my bag before we hiked back out, so my dad packed it up for me. After a while it was time to hike back out, so I put on my pack and we started hiking. After a good 10 feet my pack felt so much heavier than it did on the hike-in. After a good quarter mile I was complaining like nobody's business. Half a mile up the trail I threw off my pack to see why it was so dang heavy. It turns out my dad replaced all my clothes and gear with small boulders. While putting my stuff in his bag, he promptly asked me if I was going to start packing my own bag up when we went on our next camping trip. The more I think about it, the more I believe this is more of an awesome parenting technique than a questionable one. TLDR. My dad put small boulders in my backpack on a hiking trip. I believe small boulders are just called rocks. When I was about 8, my stepdad blindfolded me while I was asleep and then proceeded to set off the fire alarms. I awoke terrified, thinking my house was on fire, and he was screaming at me from the other room to save my little sister. She was only 3, and she was so upset that along with screaming and crying, she was refusing to budge. In my 8-year-old mind, I had to get her down the stairs to save her from the fire. I was small for my age and she was a very chubby child, but I picked her up and struggled to get her down the stairs. Except I tripped over a pile of clothes and we both fell about halfway down. After picking myself up off the floor, my blindfold had started to come off. I pulled it off to see my stepdad trying to calm my sister down and glaring at me. I ended up getting in trouble for injuring my sister. Apparently, he was trying to teach me how to react in a disaster scenario and I failed. Also, he recorded the entire incident with his video camera. It is his favorite thing to show my new boyfriends. What the actual frick? On one long drive from Vancouver, BC, to Winnipeg, MB, my sister and I, both under 10 at this point, were in the backseat of my dad's car, fighting over a dinky electric keyboard. She was older so she got everything she wanted, but I had been taking a few years of piano lessons so I wanted to actually play it properly. The shrieking and I'd make her give it back got to be too much, I guess, because my dad pulled the car over somewhere in the middle of the Rocky Mountains along the highway, kicked us both out of the car, and drove off. My sister and I stopped, looked at each other, and started walking. Logging trucks were zooming by at frighteningly high speeds a couple meters from us, and anyone could have stopped and picked us up at any point. But my dad took about 20 minutes doing whatever before he reappeared and told us to get back in the car. We shut up for the rest of the day and probably the rest of the trip. My mom didn't hear about this story for the next 12-14 years, but when she did, she just about killed my dad. I don't know why it didn't occur to us to tell her, but just the thought of us being potentially kidnapped by some wacko on Highway 1 made her absolutely furious. Over a decade later. Thanks, Dad. Car trips. 1. If we would fight, Dad would pull over and tell us to get out of the car to fight. 2. If we were just misbehaving, Dad would pull over, tell us he would meet us down the road in 9-10 minutes. He would drive down the road. He says it would tire us out, and he could always see us in the rear view. The really fricked up part of this is that a lot of this did not happen in the US or Europe, but some of this happened in Africa. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, my father called me over to his wheelchair, multiple sclerosis, and said, "I want to see how strong you are. Make your hand into a fist and hold it in front of your face. I'm going to try to pull it away. You've got to try and keep it in the same place." So I figure, frick yeah, I'm going to show my dad how strong I am. I hold it pretty dang near right in front of my face for about 40 seconds before he lets go, and I punch myself in the face so hard I end up on the floor, crying. He picks me up, laughing uncontrollably, and says, "Let that be a lesson. Trust no one, not even me." I love that man more than I'll ever be able to express. Same thing happened to my friend as a kid. He was told by his dad, "Hey, Brad, climb this ladder, then jump, and I'll catch you." Brad climbed the ladder, jumped, but his dad moved his arms away and let him hit the pavement. He then said, "Let that be a lesson to you. Don't trust anyone." My friend has back problems now. When I was an older teenager, 15 plus, my dad would offer to fight me when I got in trouble, instead of whatever punishment I was supposed to get. If I won, I wasn't in trouble, and if I lost, he would kick my butt. He was also fond of telling me that in life, it's not the strongest or the smartest who wins, it's the most ruthless. I think he was disappointed that I didn't become a supervillain. Okay, now, I'm going to need you to drive off the side of the road. Just a little. Don't crash, but maintain speed and drive off the road. My dad teaching me what to do if I fall asleep at the wheel. He fell asleep and flipped over a bridge when I was really little, so he liked to make sure I was ultra prepared. Won't even turn on the car unless everyone is buckled up. As such, even if I'm only 5 minutes from home, if I feel sleepy I will find the closest safe spot and take a nap. Starting in 2nd grade, my parents didn't pay for my school lunches. They didn't provide food at home either, my clothes, or my toiletries. They did this because they wanted me to learn financial responsibility, so they gave me $30 a month. Trust me, there was much more they didn't pay for. Needless to say, I wasn't very good at spending my money. I didn't eat lunch for the longest time and my clothes became ragged and I started wearing my brother's clothes. Also being 8, when I ran out of shampoo, I usually just didn't shower for a while. My father made well over $250,000 a year. We got reported to child services for neglect. Nothing really went through, but they told me parents they needed to provide more and they'd drop everything. We moved from Oregon to Florida because family members, teachers, and some people at our community were butting in saying they needed to take care of us. My parents were starting to get annoyed. My mother had died and this was all about our stepmother's teaching technique. She had 2 separate closets for clothes, They both drove Mercedes and they refused to help with the basic necessities. It was a little ridiculous how much of my dad's money she spent. Not exactly relevant, but she eventually ran my dad into near bankruptcy. Oddly enough, I did turn out pretty alright. Ever since I was 17, I've been paying for all my personal expenses including tuition and living on my own. It's very hard, but at the same time, I'm very proud that I'm completely independent. It's maturity me a lot, but I'm still somewhat bitter. I'd be bitter too. Your stepmom is a classic succubus. When I was 13 my dad turned me loose on Bourbon Street and just said to meet him back at a certain restaurant in 3 hours. My dad thought hitting me would teach me a lesson. Didn't work because when I got bigger than him I beat the crap out of him. I guess he learned a lesson. You asked for questionable parenting techniques. It taught someone a lesson. When I was little, my dad would hold me under the cold shower if I was naughty. Also one day he drove me far away to an orphanage because he said he was going to dump me there. He left me in the car. Went in to ask them if they had space for me. They did not, however, is what he said when he came back, so he was not going to drop me off today. We used to live in Africa when I was about 8 years old. My sister was 11. We were bickering and fighting in the car, enough to drive my mother crazy. She stopped the car and said, "Get out. If you're going to fight, you can walk home." My sister sat down on the side of the road and cried. Me? I started jogging home. I sorta knew where we were, so I was keen to go. Needless to say, my mom quickly got my sister back in the car and pulled up beside me. "Get back in the car. Stop fighting with your sister." I mentioned Africa because it wasn't particularly safe where we were, so my mom definitely couldn't have continued with her bluff. I was 11 when I was told that if I didn't earn $25 to feed myself, I wouldn't be allowed to go to Disneyland with the rest of the family. I was only able to earn $20, so I was made to stay with my stepdad's mother while the rest of the family went to Disneyland without me. The next year my parents kicked me out, put me in foster care, for getting poor grades. I use quotes because not only were they not my parents, my stepdad remarried after my mom passed away, so they were both step-parents, and my bio dad was messed up from Vietnam. But they made it clear that I was lucky to be living with them. The threat of foster care was always hanging over my head. Not exactly the most comforting and nurturing environment. Seems like the majority of the time, they were trying to teach me how to be tough by not comforting me when I was feeling down. Regardless of whether or not my mother had just passed away. Truly some of the most misguided, fricked up parents to ever have the privilege of raising kids. My father did this on his weekends. He would give me a survival knife and drop me off miles away from home. He also used to bet other kids $20 they couldn't beat me up. After he started forcing me to take karate classes. We haven't spoken in 10 years. I remember that my father left my sister and I in the parking lot of Disneyland after dragging us out of the park for bickering who would be closer to Mickey during a photo when we were really young. He's had a really bad tendency of making any sort of trip to any theme park a traumatic memory for me in particular. Another one, but to a lesser degree, involved him having a full-on tantrum in the middle of Six Flags. You can't just not tell us the Six Flags tantrum story. My parents were very sketchy about the doctor. There were many times, stitches, poisoning, etc., that I should have gotten medical attention, but they thought they could fix it at home. If I can't see your bones, I don't want to hear about it. When I was little, for punishment, my dad would lock me in a closet in the basement, remind me of the rats, and then turn off all the lights. It was fricked up. I still remember the spider closet. Thanks mom and dad. My parents never supported anything I ever did or do. Their idea of advice or help was to heap doubt on everything I thought or planned on doing, in the hopes it would make me a thoughtful, cautious person that never made mistakes. Instead, I'm incredibly indecisive and don't have any confidence. Same story here. My mom is extremely critical and doesn't know how to give out praise. In addition to that, result is that I have no motivation and fear new things. Not gonna lie, but it sounds a lot like your parents ditched you and when you randomly came back they called it a life lesson. You see Jimmy, I was trying to teach you the importance of running from bears. When my mom got mad at me, like really angry, she'd tell me to get out of her house. I'd end up walking like 10 miles down the road just so she'd have to come find me. Once she got really mad that I had walked so far and told me that I had to walk back. I grew up on a property which was 200 acres of forestry bushland, rural Australia. As kids we loved to explore, but I doubt we were familiar with more than the 20 acres immediately surrounding where our house was. The rest of the property was steep hills and uncleared bushland that was of little interest to us. The outer edges of the property were only accessible by one road which did not link up to our house. Therefore it took around an hour to drive to certain points as we had to take the long way. When I was maybe 10 years old, my father drove myself, my two brothers, ages 8 and 11, and our dog to a remote, unfamiliar place at the edge of our property, then told us to find our way home. We had not paid any attention on the drive and had absolutely no idea which way to go. We knew downhill seemed right, but couldn't tell whether we needed to go left or right. We had no food or water and phones weren't even a thing. We chose a random direction and started walking, and tried to make it into a fun game by pretending to be Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli hunting orcs, and our dog was Smeagol. After walking for what seemed like days, we heard our dog barking at something up ahead, and she had found 2 other sheep dogs. We knew someone must have been nearby, and sure enough a bearded, middle-aged farmer emerged out of the bushland. He yelled at us for trespassing for a bit. We'd wandered into neighboring farm before we explained our situation, and we found out he was the son of our neighbors. He pointed us in the right direction and within half an hour we were in familiar territory. I remember running crying to mum as soon as we got inside and feeling ultimately betrayed when we found out that she'd supported dad's decision to abandon us in the wild. Dad still thinks it was a good idea and that we learnt valuable life lessons. But ultimately I don't think we did, because I still have a terrible sense of direction and my brothers tend to spend the majority of their lives indoors playing computer games instead of utilizing their survival skills in the wild. Reminds me of the fairy tale where the father left the boy and girl alone in the forest since the family didn't have enough food to feed everyone through the winter. They weren't meant to find their way home, but to die. Asked my dad for an original PlayStation when they had just come out. He replied, "Sure, let's go," and then he took me to McDonald's and got me an application. The severity of this is entirely dependent on your age at the time. We were sitting around a bonfire out at a lake with family and friends on our one vacation. I was chasing my cousins around and we were having a good time. When my dad stops me, he pulls me closer and says, "Hey, step on those embers for me." I was barefoot and I said, "No, it'll burn me." He said, "Nah, they're too small, you won't even feel it." I again protested, but he reassured me that they couldn't hurt me. So I did it and I screamed for hours afterwards, more from the feeling of betrayal than from pain. I decided that day never to trust a dang thing my dad said. My dad built our house when I was about 6. As part of the building process, a large pit was dug, I assume for trash disposal. Late 70s. Over the months of construction it filled with water. Dad decided I should learn to swim by tossing me in once. I assume he'd have come in after me if I hadn't figured it out. Nice. Chuck your kid into a rainwater filled trash heap. Say hello to tetanus. In my blue-collar family, my father and mother paid my sister and I early on to do things like paint or clean, on top of our regular chores, in order to instill a sense of financial responsibility and work ethic in us. This leads me to the example of the massive, 3-day, 200-person 4th of July party and campout held on a family friend's property each year, in which my father would pay all the kids a penny for each cigarette butt they picked up off of the ground and threw in the trash. I distinctly remember cashing out one day, walking to the nearest 7-Eleven and buying a 6-pack of root beer and a couple of canisters of whipped cream. Approx. $10 1,000 something cigarette butts. Totally character building experience. I love my dad. Mums of Reddit, what is a wild secret of your past that your kids rather not know about? My mom told my siblings and me on Easter when I was 14 that she used to be a child prostitute for the accuser. She told us because her sister was going to tell us because she felt like my mom had stolen her daughter and was using it as a bargaining chip. My cousin came to live with us across the country because her mom was in jail for drug abuse. Now go find those eggs, you little rascals. My mum told me once, while she was tipsy, that my dad was actually her high school teacher and they began a sexual relationship when she was his student at the age of 16. She said they would often have sex with her in school uniform. They managed to keep everything under wraps for years, and they got married when she graduated from college and gave birth to me a few years later. Not sure how wild this is, but right before I was born, like 2 or 3 days beforehand, my dad's older cousin had a daughter born severely unhealthy. She wasn't stillborn, but she wasn't going to make it past a few days. So anyway, after I was born, my dad's aunt came into the delivery room and said to my mom, "You two are young, you'll have plenty of time to have another child, but my daughter can't. Let me buy this baby off of you." I only found out about this when I was 15 because my sister told me. Apparently my parents never planned on telling me this. Growing up, my mother was a titan. She graduated top of her class in her field and chaired several major drug regulation boards. She was always very serious about school, and we were told that B's were absolutely unacceptable because she was a straight A student all through college. We took that to heart up until I was cleaning out the attic a few years ago when I discovered some old grade reports from college. Guess who got a C in sociology and another one in linear algebra? Tough take, mom. Tough take. This is a good one, lol. I'm the dad in this situation, but my wife used to be severely addicted to opiates, which I helped get her out of by moving the family to a new town and letting her spend 2 weeks in bed dealing with withdrawals while I handled every other aspect of the house, including finding work and setting up the kids for school, etc. I just told the kids she was sick and needed to sleep, which wasn't entirely false. It was super emotionally taxing, but I would do it again in a heartbeat because it worked and she's been clean for 2 years. Congratulations to your wife and you for beating her addictions. When my wife let it slip around her mom that she was having a lot of lesbian urges, her mom just waved it off and said, "Been there, done that, didn't like it." By how furiously grossed out my grandmother reacts when anyone brings up me or lesbianism, I've wondered if she ever had experiences in her heydays, but from what my mother says, she's had a pretty stunted, unfulfilled sex life. Almost sad until it isn't, cause, you know, no one's fault but your own at that point. Not my mom, thank God, but an old girlfriend's. Her grandma got her mom drunk at the age of 15 and had a guest stranger have sex with her. Not quite wild, more dark really, and horribly sad. I just learned that I was likely conceived on Easter, when my mom wore a crotchless lace onesie and teased my dad all night, and then I was born 9 months later. FML. At least there's some passion there. I was conceived during a hurricane because no TV. I grew weed legally. When I did it, my straight-laced father went on a long speech about growing techniques and tips. About 2/3 through he kinda stopped and stared at me and my brother and adds the addendum. "So I've heard. ETA through it all my mom was shooting daggers at him." I met my son's dad through a post he made on the casual encounters section of Craigslist. Our families think we met at a sports bar. ETA. I didn't get pregnant from a one-time thing or an NSA situation. We were together for 6 years. My mom used to date a drug lord in Birmingham, but was practically his crack whore. He raped her. She had my brother, and to get away from it all, she joined the military. Dude ended up going to prison at the same time, and was stabbed to death just a few weeks in. My mother didn't tell us or my brother, until he was around 35ish. Whoa. Thanks for the silver kind, stranger. My first. Just wondering, is this Birmingham, Alabama or Birmingham, UK? One Thanksgiving, my grandmother confessed to the family that her father had run a speakeasy and that she would tend bar mind the shop while he was out on liquor runs. I think she was pretty ashamed, but I think everyone found it pretty cool and didn't understand why she kept it a secret so long. My firstborn daughter I had at a very young age. I was 18, in grade 12. Skipping every single day, partying all the time and hanging out with a drug dealer at the time. That's her dad. He and I are not together. I moved on and got married and he is currently engaged, and he stopped dealing shortly after we found out I was pregnant. We co-parent really well actually, and he is now quite the stand-up father. All our daughter knows is that her mom and dad didn't love each other, so we separated. And now she's lucky to have 2 moms and 2 dads that love her very much. She's now 7. I'm wondering if it'll ever come out later about how her dad and I met. Dang, what a turnaround for the biological father. Good on him. And your daughter too. Daughter of a mother with a wild secret. My dad was abusive, an extreme alcoholic, and hit her regularly, so she kicked him in the balls so hard that he couldn't have kids after me. Obviously. He's dead now. Drunk driving. He took 4 people with him. My aunt got tipsy and told me everything. That my high school boyfriend and I had a son at 16 years old. We went through Catholic family services for an open adoption. We both get updates on how he is doing, even though we are not involved anymore. Also, my son is included in my will. Tell your other kids before you die. It's fairly easy for them to understand. I found out in my late teens I had half sisters and it was hard to deal with. I can't imagine how much hate I'd feel for my dad if I found out in his will. I used to be an escort. If being an escort doesn't make me a member of the PTA, nothing will. I'm almost afraid to ask what an Aztec swirl is in this context. How much of my teens I spent high, but now weed's socially acceptable in most cases. That's not even a thing. I'm disappointed. It's almost fun in a way to have something to shock your kids with. My own mom is really vanilla and is very old school. Bet she's probably hiding the fact she runs a local swingers club or something. Both my parents were very honest throughout most of my life, but over the summer when I was 17 my mom had mentioned that before I was born that my dad wanted to get an abortion. I had figured out on my own why my dad wanted an abortion was because we didn't make enough money to support another child. But my mother fought for me, so my dad ended up stopped drinking and smoking to be able to financially support me. That's a great story. I hope you and your dad get on really well. Just found out last year that my mom got pregnant in college. The guy split as soon as he found out and she never saw him again. She decided to have the baby, avoided going home when she was showing, and gave it up for adoption. My grandparents never knew. They died a few years ago, and I found out due to an Ancestry.com DNA test. My half-brother contacted me and we pieced it together. She was relieved that it all came out in the end. It had been weighing on her all these years. She's in her 70s. I'm 40 now, and my new half-brother is 52 or so. Needless to say, it was a huge surprise. I never in a million years would have guessed at that. This also happened in my family. Same exact scenario with the adoption. Everyone is really accepting of it. It's a beautiful thing. This will get buried and this story is from my dad. When I was 19 and visiting home from college, my dad and I stayed up getting pee drunk. When I told him about my love for psychedelics, he clapped and said, "I knew it." I asked why and he stated that, "Your mom was the acid queen, and we learned she was pregnant with you when she was 4 months in. We were tripping for your first couple of months." That I met their dad on World of Warcraft when I was 16, and ran away to be with him 2 days before I turned 18. He is 11 years older than me. They can know the overview, but boy, the details of it are real shady, especially when I am going to have to teach them internet safety and online stranger danger. I am now divorced and their dad has moved away, and we have a positive co-parent relationship, and though he's not very involved, we both just want the best for the kids. Which leads me into the fact I don't want them to know how I feel about the relationship looking back and the manipulation and emotional abuse. I don't want my daughter to know that I wanted to abort her because I was 20 and in college and knew there was no way we could support her, and that I was heavily guilted into it by their dad because of his age, at 31, being his last chance. We used to sell weed by the pound out of grandma's basement. Dad loves all kinds of drugs, and I have sampled most, just not the heavy ruin your life ones. Truly, I just want to be a stoner at heart. Whoa, 31 is not even remotely last chance territory. What a joke. When I graduated college, my mom casually dropped the fact that she, a tiny little Asian woman, used to deal large quantities of marijuana when she was in high school, and once had to skip a basketball game because she accidentally took a duffel bag full of weed to school instead of her gym bag. I guess that I was a stripper for a while, and worked at a bank the same time. Don't think I would share that, but if I heard them talk down about strippers I'd probably educate them on what it's really like. I did what I had to do to put food on the table and give them a good life. My immediate family knows, except my stepdad, and my children's dad knows. We sometimes talk about it but not really. I guess that I was a stripper for a while, and worked at a bank the same time. Don't think I would share that. Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to tell your kids you worked in a bank. Bankers are shady AF. I don't want my kids to know anything about how I was raised. I really don't. Like, I can't watch anything family themed without crying. Most no kid movies leave me with a lump in my throat so big I could choke on it. And as they get older it's harder to turn my face far enough for them not to see and twice as hard to not cry. My ceiling is their floor and I really just don't want them to have to handle grown-up problems until they are grown-ups. My wild secret is that's why we go for walks as a family rather than the movies. The movies are somewhere my husband takes them for special one-on-one time so it's still a special thing that they get to do. But I won't make them sit through their mom having a freaking breakdown over some Ohana means family and family means nobody gets left behind line. My mom was raised in a crappy strict household. I learned a lot from her stories of things she wanted to do differently from her parents. A lot of time crappy parenting can get passed on from generation to generation because that's all they know. She would always mention how she prided herself in breaking the cycle. My mom was a crazy native child that started smoking at 10. Smoke or choke as my grandma put it. Sold single cigarettes in elementary school. Once burned down a patch of forest because she was playing with fire with her friends. Smoked her brother's weed and drank with her dad. And ran away from home at 19. Now she scolds me and my sis for swearing in front of her. I work with troubled youth on a reserve, and smoking and drinking at 10 is way too common with these kids. Your mom's story really isn't even that uncommon. Makes me appreciate how my parents made sure to not raise me on the res. But here I am working there every day, and I hate it. I'm married but before I met my husband a lot of my relationships were with women. I would talk about but I think they'd be grossed out about the thought of me having any life at all before they existed. I have also struggled with depression since I was a teenager. We have talked a little bit about why I take meds but I don't think they understand how serious it is. Plus, marijuana has recently become legal in my state so I am about to check that out. I'm sure you know this, but be careful trying marijuana with depression as it can make existing issues worse. Not saying don't do it, but be careful and monitor yourself. Most of my life before I met her father, I sold drugs to pay my way through college and almost married the dude I sold for. That's not even the worst thing. My friends and I used to break into buildings for fun when I was in high school. We never got caught. We also never stole anything, but it was still super dangerous and also just freaking creepy on our parts. I was a sugar baby in college. Made a lot of money but blew it all on dumb stuff. Also my best friend from college and my roommate had the same sugar daddy. My kids call her aunt. They love her and she loves to babysit. My roommate and I had a lot of sex with each other. It was enjoyable but it was mostly due to our daddy. He obviously found it hot. I was also submissive to both of them. Mommy did some nasty things. Well, username definitely checks out. I was talking with my mom about finding jobs and she told me all sorts of things she did for jobs, including working as a waitress at a strip club. I had an ex who told me she worked as a strip club waitress. Maybe she did, but she also stripped. Mom's been deceased for 38 years. Drunk oldest brother told me last year that she was a prostitute for a short time in the late 1950s. We're an older family. Large family with intermittent dad. Doesn't really change anything because she was a good provider, but I'd rather not have known. That I supported myself and my infant daughter by working in an adult novelty store when I was a struggling teenage mom. Her father had taken off. I was trying to get through school. I did what I had to do, and that involved selling dildos and body whip, and not asking questions about the section that was corded off and curtained. That's called working a job. That's really nothing to be ashamed of. Oh buddy, I'm late to the party, but here goes. Started doing drugs at 14. Went from trying weed to snorting coke in about 6 months. My drug habit turned addiction gave me the opportunity to try almost every substance imaginable. Except M. I love uppers. M would have killed me. While I was hooked on crack, I had sex for money and or drugs. I stole things constantly for fun and for necessity. I conned people into giving me valuable items money. Eventually, I quit crack and chilled out a bit, but I was still recklessly promiscuous and doing every non-crack drug I could get my hands on. This continued until I was 28, when I hit rock bottom. My lowest point was the culmination of 2 events which occurred within the same month. I got a DUI and I fricked a horrible guy who, I found out afterwards, was HIV+. We hadn't used protection. There's a happy ending though. I got tested, I have HPV, but nothing worse, and I got clean. In July I'll celebrate 6 years sober with my husband and 2 daughters. Oh boy, my mom has a lot of crap in her past. My mom has done a lot of drugs, got a fake id for a full-time job and booze, beat up a lot of girls my TS cheated on in high school, dropped out of high school, got my grandpa arrested, and lived a crappy childhood in general. She told us everything she did to try and led us through a better childhood. Bonus. On our way to a little league baseball game as a kid, we got cut off by some young woman and her boyfriend when we were leaving our shared driveway with them. My mom got out of the car and was chewing them when the girl for some reason shoved my mom. Mom tackled her and punched the crap out of her. Dumb girl tried to grab a rock, and my mom pinned her arm down with her knee while smashing her face in. BF tried pulling my mom off and got an elbow, then he just sat back scared. Interesting to see as a kid. Your therapist will see you now. My husband and I had our first child when I was quite young and there are nearly 11 years between her and our son. One day my daughter will tell my son all the crazy things about their playboy mommy, my working in strip clubs for years, drugs, parties, punk rock bands crashing on our living room floor. The wild times went on until she was 8 or 9 and our lives became more stable and predictable. Our adult daughter reflects positively on most of her childhood, though, so I doubt it will be a conversation where she judges me harshly to her little bro. ETA my comment from below due to some super aggressive DMs. I know, it's not clear. I was typing to be succinct, so the devil is in the lack of details, I suppose. I tended bar in a bunch of strip clubs while going to mortuary school to be a funeral director. I made a good living in 2-3 nights of work per week, allowing extra time to play music, be with my family and go to school. I had a crappy, but short, run with substance abuse in 03 after I had some unattended emotional trauma that bested me. I went to rehab and therapy and got better. I was in a variety of punk bands between 1992 to 2005. We made some decent friends and contacts playing in nightclubs. We opened for some much cooler acts and made some real money. We would play punk versions of kids songs in the living room and the kids, my one kid and the kids of the others, would go nuts. They danced, laughed, and drank juice boxes with their pizza. See, not as depraved as one might think, just poorly explained. This reads like a Tori Amos song. Not me, but my friend's mother. This was during her high school years, senior year I think. Anyways, the drinking age here in Canada is 18, so you could be a HS student and get S-faced. One night she was bar hopping with some buddies when she noticed a girl that had been her childhood bully standing around outside. Confronted her, lots of yelling, one thing led to another, and my friend's mom lit her hair on fire. That woman still has short hair today. It's actually only 18 in Quebec, Manitoba, and Alberta. It's 19 for the rest of the country. Throwaway account. I dealt with severe PTSD from sexual assault and abuse as a teenager. I barely graduated high school, not due to grades, just due to fricked up coping mechanisms. I tried almost every drug by the time I was 18. Had a full-blown opiate addiction the year after my son was born. Been off pills and everything since he was 11 months old. His dad was incredibly physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive to me. Like an idiot I didn't fight him for custody during our divorce. I spent 3 years being told how worthless I was and a whole year having it literally beat into me. I'm currently fighting for full custody of my son, and I'm in a stable relationship with my daughter's father. I have a great job, good benefits, a clean house, familial support, and I'm going to do everything I can to be a positive influence and support for my kids. I'm currently looking for a therapist that specializes in domestic violence survivors and recovering addicts. However, with positive coping mechanisms, I'm currently able to correctly use controlled substances when they are prescribed to me. I had a prescription for Percocet for a terrible tooth infection that spread to my jaw last week, and I took half a pill every 6 hours and had no desire to continue taking it. I use kratom for pain management, as I have severe tendonitis and a healing labral tear in my hip. All in all, I'm much better than I used to be, and when they're old enough I'll be honest about my past and my struggles. But until then, I give age appropriate answers. My son asked why I'm not married to his dad anymore, and I told him we weren't very nice to each other. He's only 5, so I'm pretty sure he doesn't need to hear about the bruises and broken bones. Best of luck. Hopefully you'll get better and all your struggles will be past you. I found out, after my older sister died at 3 days old, they smoked a ton of weed for a few months to help with the grief. They stopped when my mom got pregnant with their second child, and they left all of their party lifestyle in Texas. When I was 19, my mother thought I was 3 towns over staying with a friend while her parents were out of town. I was 4 states away with my 29-year-old boyfriend. By the time I was 17, I had been hospitalized for attempted suicide 3 times. There have been times since. Grandpa really isn't their grandpa. He's genetically my stepdad. Their biological grandfather is a drug-addicted, alcoholic pedophile that deserves to die a most painful death. I had 2 miscarriages before I turned 22, one at 17 and one at 21. The first because my boyfriend kicked me as hard as he could in my stomach. The second because I was in a car accident. It's best we don't even bring up mom's sex life. They have enough nightmares. My mom's story wasn't quite as hellish as yours but similar. If you ever need a friendly ear, I would be happy to do it. I have scars on my wrists from a, thankfully, failed suicide attempt when my daughter was 4. She vaguely remembers me being in the hospital and thinks I was in a car accident. I never want to tell her the truth no matter how old she is. You should as she gets older because mental illness is often genetic and it may help her know that she can always turn to you knowing that you understand. My son has no idea his father sold drugs to support him when he was a baby or that we then visited him in jail when he was an infant every few months. He has no memory of this. His father now has been away at college a few years. He's actually a H addict. Not looking forward to talks in the far future. I'm a very normal mom with a very normal life. But before I settled down with my family I was vaguely popular on a furry website and drew some downright nasty furry pee. I traded my Photoshop skills for crocheting. I feel like this is going to become more and more common as time goes on. Turns out there's only one mom on Reddit and the rest are guys who already know what their moms have been up to. Way to read, fellas. It's not a bad thing per se, but my dad hid the fact that he's Canadian from all his children for 21 years. I found his passport by accident in a locked box that I broke into. This will probably get buried but I feel like I need to get it out. My mom and I went to the same rehab where you have to tell your life story. From the time you were born until the day you told your story. My mom told me maybe one day she would let me read hers but I found it accidentally a few weeks ago. I knew she had some bad things happen to her but I never knew what she had actually been through. There were 28 pages so I won't say everything. Here's a few of the things that were most shocking to me. Her grandfather molested her when she was 7 and when she told her dad and aunt about it they cut her out completely of their lives until she turned 18 when her dad came and apologized and then raped her. My uncle Will molested her. Her mom used to bring home guys a lot and on several separate occasions she would wake up to strangers molesting her. She started doing hard drugs when she was 15. C. Acid, shrooms, M. H a few times, any kind of pill she found, etc. Her multiple failed suicide attempts. But one of the hardest parts to read though was that she held so much resentment towards me when she found out about my addictions and that she was afraid she was going to relapse because of it. We're both doing much better. She's been sober for 3 years and I've been sober for almost a year now. I've never been so proud of her in my entire life. I love you, Mom. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.